The most dangerous thing in the 5 border territories wasn't the winter wolves or the blood feuds that had ravaged the frontier for generations. It was waking up in King Darius Kael's bed with a mating mark you didn't remember getting and a wedding band that shouldn't exist. Elara Thorn learned that the hard way. She'd spent 5 years hiding in plain sight, buried in the dusty archives beneath the royal fortress, cataloging the very war records that documented her people's slaughter. 5 years keeping her head down, her power buried, her true identity locked behind a false name and careful smiles. 5 years of survival in the one place no one would ever think to look for the last daughter of the Nightfall Pack, right under the Killer King's roof. And now she was in his bed, wearing his mark, bound by a bond that should have been impossible. If you want to know how a nobody archivist became queen of the most brutal kingdom in the north and brought down the man who destroyed them both, stay until the end. Drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Because this story, it gets darker before the dawn. The pre-dawn cold bit through the stone walls of Thornhaven Fortress like a knife through flesh. Elara Thorn had always been an early riser, a habit born from years of sneaking through corridors before the castle stirred, before anyone could ask too many questions about the quiet archivist who seemed to appear from nowhere 5 years ago. But this morning, she woke to warmth. Unnatural, overwhelming warmth wrapped around her back, and the slow, steady rhythm of breathing that wasn't her own. Her eyes snapped open to unfamiliar silk sheets the color of midnight, to walls she'd only ever seen from the outside, to the scent of pine and steel and something wild that made every instinct in her body scream danger. She was in the king's private chamber, and worse, far worse, there was an arm around her waist, heavy, possessive. The hand resting against her ribs bore scars she recognized from 1,000 royal portraits, the 3 claw marks across the knuckles earned in the border wars, the same hand that had signed the execution orders for her entire pack. King Darius Kael. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. Her breath came short and sharp, but she forced herself still. Don't panic. Don't move. Think. She tried to piece together the previous night. There had been the Harvest Moon Gala, the first she'd ever attended, dragged along by the head archivist who'd insisted his staff needed to show their faces for once. She remembered the great hall blazing with candlelight, nobles in their finest silks, and the king on his throne, watching everything with those cold amber eyes that missed nothing. She remembered wine, dancing, laughter that felt strange in her mouth after years of silence. And then, nothing. A void where memory should be. Elara's gaze dropped to her left hand and her blood turned to ice. A silver band circled her ring finger. Intricate wolf designs chased each other around the metal, and in the center, a stone the color of fresh blood caught the dim light. She recognized it immediately, the royal marriage signet. Only one existed in all the 5 territories. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her other hand flew to her collarbone, and she felt it before she saw it, raised skin, still burning with residual heat. She twisted toward the polished steel mirror across the room and saw her reflection. A fresh mating mark, black as midnight, intricate as lace, spreading from her collarbone up the side of her neck. The mark of an alpha's claim. His claim. "This isn't happening." Her voice cracked. "This can't be." The arm around her waist tightened, and the breathing behind her changed, deeper, conscious. "Who the hell are you?" The voice was rough with sleep, but carried the unmistakable edge of command. Elara went rigid as King Darius Kael pulled back, the warmth vanishing as he sat up. She heard the rustle of sheets, felt the weight shift on the mattress. She turned slowly, keeping her eyes down the way she'd trained herself to do for 5 years. "Don't look directly at the king. Don't draw attention. Don't— I asked you a question." His voice was colder now. She forced herself to look up. King Darius Kael was exactly as the stories described. A man carved from violence and winter. 6.5 feet of scarred muscle and barely contained fury, with amber eyes that could strip lies from bone and black hair that fell past his shoulders in the old warrior style. He wore nothing but loose sleep pants, and every inch of exposed skin bore the evidence of a life spent fighting, scars from blades, claws, fire. He was also staring at her with the exact same horror she felt. "You're—" His eyes dropped to the mating mark on her collarbone, then to his own left hand. his hand where an identical silver band now rested. What did you do? Me? Elara's fear crystallized into anger. You think I'm an archivist. I work in the basement. I don't even... She stopped, throat tight. I don't remember last night. Neither do I. The admission hung between them like a blade. Darius swung his legs off the bed and stood in one fluid motion. He moved like a predator, even half awake, crossing to a side table where a pitcher of water sat. He poured a glass, drank it in 3 long swallows, then poured another. Your name, he said, not looking at her. Elara Thorn. And you work in the archives. Not a question. He was fitting pieces together the same way she was. How long? 5 years? 5 years. He turned and his gaze was sharp enough to cut. And in those 5 years, we've never spoken. No, Your Majesty. Don't call me that. He set the glass down with a sharp click. If we're mated, he spat the word like poison. Then apparently, we're past formalities. Elara's hands curled into fists in her lap. We can't be mated. It's not possible. I'm not... She caught herself. I'm not from a noble family. I'm not worthy of a king. I'm not supposed to exist. Not what? His eyes narrowed. Nothing. I'm nobody. A record keeper. This doesn't make sense. No. Darius moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to let in the gray pre-dawn light. It doesn't. Mating bonds don't just happen. They require intent, choice. And I sure as hell didn't choose... He stopped. No offense. None taken. Elara stood, pulling the sheet around herself like armor. She wore a slip dress she didn't recognize, silk that clung to her skin, not her clothes. Someone had dressed her, or undressed her. The thought made her stomach turn. We need to figure out what happened. Agreed. Darius's jaw tightened. The last thing I remember clearly is the opening toast. After that, he pressed his fingers to his temple. Fragments. Nothing solid. Same. Elara closed her eyes, reaching for the memories. I remember the great hall, the musicians, and then dancing maybe, or talking to someone. The images slipped away like smoke. It's all wrong, like someone took a blade to my memory and carved out ours. Or drugged us. The words fell between them like stones. Elara's eyes snapped open. What? Think about it. Darius turned from the window, and in the gray light he looked even more dangerous. We both have gaps in our memory. We wake up married with mating marks neither of us remembers giving or receiving. Someone went to considerable effort to make this happen. But why? Elara's mind raced. What would anyone gain from... She stopped, really looking at him for the first time. At the king of the 5 border territories, the alpha who'd held these brutal lands together through sheer will and violence. You. Me. You're the target. The pieces fell together with horrible clarity. Someone wanted you bound, compromised, tied to a woman you don't know, don't trust, can't control. She laughed, sharp and bitter. And they picked the perfect person, a nobody. Someone with no family, no allies, no power. Someone who can't protect you or herself. Darius studied her with new intensity. You're wrong about one thing. What's that? You're not nobody anymore. You're the queen of the 5 territories. His smile was sharp as broken glass. And someone very powerful just made a catastrophic mistake. Oh, the fortress came alive as the sun crested the eastern peaks. Servants moved through corridors, soldiers changed watch, and in the great hall below, the court began to assemble for the morning audience. Normal. Routine. Except nothing would ever be routine again. Elara stood before the mirror in the king's private bathing chamber, staring at the stranger wearing her face. Someone had laid out clothes for her, a deep green gown of fine wool, embroidered with silver wolves at the hem and cuffs. Queen's clothes. The kind of thing she'd have spent 3 months' wages on in her old life. Her old life that had ended sometime last night. She touched the mating mark again. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. The design was unique to Darius. She could see his signature in the sharp lines, the way the pattern suggested both protection and possession. A mark like this couldn't be faked. It came from deep magic, from the moment when two souls recognized each other and chose to bind, except they hadn't chosen. "Someone chose for us," she murmured. "Talking to yourself?" Elara spun. Darius stood in the doorway, fully dressed now, in black leather and steel. He looked every inch the warrior king, right down to the blades at his belt and the cold assessment in his eyes. "Just thinking." She turned back to the mirror, lifting her hair to better see the mark. "Have you ever heard of a forced mating bond?" "No. They're supposed to be impossible to forge. The magic reads intent." He moved into the room, keeping careful distance between them. "But I've also never heard of two people forgetting an entire evening. So someone found a way to do both." Elara met his eyes in the mirror. "Who has that kind of power?" "That's what we're going to find out." Darius's reflection was grim. "But first we need to control the narrative. By now the entire fortress knows we spent the night together. The servants talk, the guards talk. And in the border territories, rumors are as dangerous as blades. What do you want to do?" "We face it head on." He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and set it on the marble counter. "We tell them we're married, that the bond happened during the harvest moon, blessed by the old ways. We make it look intentional. And privately? Privately, we find out who did this and why. And then," his hands curled into fists, "then we make them regret every second of it." Elara turned to face him directly. "You're asking me to lie to an entire kingdom. I'm asking you to survive." His amber eyes burned. "Because whoever orchestrated this, they wanted something specific. Either they wanted me compromised, or they wanted you elevated, or both. Until we know which, we're both targets. I'm not afraid. You should be." He took a step closer, and she caught the scent of pine and steel again. "I've ruled these territories for 8 years. I know what people do to get power, what they'll sacrifice. If someone thinks you're a weakness they can exploit, let them try." The words came out harder than she intended. 5 years of hiding, 5 years of swallowing her rage. It all crystallized in that moment. "I'm done being afraid." Something flickered in Darius's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "All right then." He stepped back. "Here's what happens next. We go down to the Great Hall together. We confirm the marriage. We accept congratulations and play the part of a couple bound by fate. And while everyone's watching the show, you and I start looking for answers." "Where do we start?" "With whoever arranged our room last night." His jaw tightened. "Someone had to prepare this chamber, witness the marriage, file the documents. In the border territories, marriages require 3 things: intent, witnesses, and blood. We gave blood." He touched his own mating mark, but someone else provided the rest. Elara nodded slowly. "Then we find them." One more thing. Darius opened the wooden box. Inside lay a second ring, this one larger, meant for a man's hand, the match to the one on her finger. "I need you to put this on me." Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the ring. "Why?" "Because a mating bond works both ways. If we're doing this, we do it completely. No half measures." He held out his right hand, not the one already bearing her mark, but his sword hand. "Make it real enough to protect us both." Elara took his hand. His skin was warm, scarred, marked by 100 battles she'd only read about in the archives. She slid the ring onto his finger, and as the metal touched his skin, she felt something, a pull, like a cord drawing tight between them. His eyes widened slightly. "You felt that?" "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The bond." He stared at their joined hands. "It's real. Forced or not, the magic recognized something." "What does that mean?" "I don't know." He pulled his hand back, breaking the contact. "But it means we're in deeper than I thought." The Great Hall of Thornhaven Fortress had witnessed coronations, executions, and peace treaties that lasted exactly as long as the ink stayed wet. But today, it witnessed something new. The introduction of an unexpected queen. Elara walked beside Darius through massive oak doors, and every head in the hall turned. Nobles in fine silks, warriors in leather and steel, merchants in practical wool, all fell silent as the king of the 5 territories entered with a woman wearing his mark. "Steady," Darius murmured, so quietly only she could hear. Elara lifted her chin and kept walking. She'd spent 5 years learning to be invisible. Now she had to learn the opposite. They reached the raised platform at the far end, where two thrones sat, one clearly used, scarred and worn, the other pristine and empty. It had been empty since Darius took the crown 8 years ago, after his father's death in the border wars. Now Darius gestured to it. Elara sat, and the simple act felt like crossing into another world. Darius remained standing, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. Most of you know me as a man who doesn't waste words, so I won't start now. His gaze swept the crowd. Last night, during the harvest moon, I took a mate. Her name is Elara Thorn. She is now your queen. The silence held for 3 heartbeats, then chaos. Voices erupted from every corner, shock, outrage, confusion. Elara caught fragments. Never even heard of her. Just an archivist? What about Lady Marin? I thought. This is madness. Enough! Darius's voice cracked like a whip, and the hall fell silent again. He didn't raise his volume, but authority rolled off him in waves. I don't recall asking for your opinions. I'm informing you of reality. The bond is made. The marriage is sealed. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me, personally. No one spoke. Elara forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her expression neutral. But inside her mind raced. She scanned the crowd, looking for reactions, for anyone who seemed too surprised or not surprised enough, and then she saw him. Near the front of the hall, standing with a cluster of high-ranking officers, Cassian Vale, the king's cousin, his most trusted commander, the man who'd led the northern campaigns and brought 3 rebellious clans to heel. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something about his gaze made her skin crawl. Now, Darius continued, we have regular business to attend to. First petition. The hall slowly returned to order, but Elara felt the weight of 100 stares. She kept her eyes on Cassian, and after a moment he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The morning audience dragged on for 3 hours. Border disputes, trade agreements, requests for soldiers to deal with winter wolves in the high passes, the endless work of keeping a frontier kingdom from tearing itself apart. Elara sat through it all, silent and watchful. She'd learned long ago that the best way to gather information was to become furniture. People said things around you they'd never say to you, and people were definitely talking. Oh, heard she worked in the archives. 5 years and no one noticed her. Convenient timing, right before the winter councils. Cassian doesn't look pleased. That last comment came from 2 merchants standing near the side door. Elara filed it away. Finally, Darius dismissed the court. As nobles and petitioners filed out, he turned to her. We need to talk. Somewhere private. Your study? No, somewhere no one will think to listen. He stood, offering his hand. Come with me. She took it, his palm warm against hers, the bond thrumming like a second heartbeat, and let him lead her out of the hall through a side passage. They climbed stairs, wound through corridors, ascended a narrow tower she'd never seen before. At the top, Darius pushed open a heavy door. Wind hit them immediately. They stood on a small balcony overlooking the entire fortress and the brutal landscape beyond. The 5 territories stretched out in all directions, mountains to the north, forests to the east, the wild plains to the south, and the frozen wastes to the west. Beautiful and deadly. No one comes up here, Darius said, releasing her hand. We can talk freely. Elara moved to the stone railing, gripping it tight. Below, the fortress looked like a child's toy. You said you wanted to find who arranged our room. I already know who did. She turned sharply. What? I sent a runner to the head steward while you were changing this morning. He confirmed that my cousin Cassian personally requested our chambers be prepared last night. Said I'd sent word ahead that I'd be needing them. Darius's voice was flat. I sent no such word. Cassian, the name tasted wrong in her mouth. Your most trusted commander. Was, maybe. Darius stared out at the mountains. I've known Cassian since we were boys. We fought in the border wars together. I trusted him with my life 12 times over. His hands tightened on the railing. But trust is the easiest weapon to forge. Why would he do this? That's the question, isn't it? Darius turned to face her. Cassian has always been loyal, but he's also ambitious, and with a foreign queen suddenly appearing, one with no family, no allies, You'd be easy to control, or eliminate. The words hung in the cold air. You think he wants your throne, Elara said slowly. I think someone wants something. Darius's amber eyes were sharp. And I think you're the key to figuring out what. You said you worked in the archives for 5 years. What exactly did you do there? Records, war histories, treaties, property transfers. She hesitated. I also maintained the genealogies. The bloodlines. Yes. Darius went very still. Did you ever work on my family's records? Sometimes. When the head archivist needed... Elara stopped, her mind racing. Oh, gods! What? 3 months ago, Cassian requested copies of the royal genealogies going back 4 generations. Said he needed them for a treaty verification. She met Darius's eyes. I thought it was strange at the time. Treaty work usually goes through the legal scribes, not the archives. But he had the proper authorization, so I gave them to him. What would he need those for? I don't know, but... Elara's breath quickened. But if he was looking for something specific in your bloodline, some weakness or legal claim, he'd need someone who could read the old records, someone with access. Darius's expression was grim. Someone like you. You think he knew about me, specifically? I think we're about to find out. Darius pulled a small knife from his belt. Give me your hand. What are you doing? Testing something. When she hesitated, he added, Trust me, just for a moment. Elara held out her hand. Darius pricked her palm with the knife, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. It welled up, dark red against her pale skin. Then he did the same to his own hand. Blood doesn't lie, he said quietly. It's one of the oldest truths in the border territories. Blood calls to blood. Power recognizes power. He pressed his bleeding palm to hers. And bloodlines remember. The moment their blood touched, Elara gasped. Power surged through her, not the gentle pull of the mating bond, but something older, wilder. Images flashed behind her eyes. Wolves running under a black moon, silver fire burning in ancient forests, voices chanting in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. And beneath it all, a name. A pack name she'd thought died with her family. Nightfall. What was that? Her voice shook. Darius stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. You have old blood. Very old. The kind that hasn't run in the 5 territories for... He stopped. What pack are you really from, Elara? She pulled her hand back, wrapping it in the hem of her dress. It doesn't matter. They're gone. Pack names don't just disappear, they... His eyes widened. Nightfall. You're from the Nightfall pack. I was. The words came out hard. Now I'm the only one left. That's impossible. The Nightfall pack was slaughtered during the Purge 12 years ago. Every man, woman, and child. Darius's voice was quiet. My father ordered it. I know. Elara met his gaze. I was there. The wind howled around them, cold and sharp as a blade. Below, the fortress went about its business, unaware that on this tower, a queen had just revealed herself to be the last survivor of a pack her husband's family had destroyed. You've been hiding, Darius said. Not a question. For 5 years, ever since I was old enough to forge new papers and a new name. Elara's hands shook, but she kept her voice steady. I came here because it was the last place anyone would look, the safest place to disappear. And now someone's found you. Darius's jaw tightened. That's what this is about. Cassian didn't just want to compromise me. He wanted to tie me to you specifically, to the last Nightfall survivor. Why? What would he gain? Leverage, scandal, proof that the current king is bound to the very bloodline his father tried to eradicate. Darius turned away, his hands curling into fists. Or maybe something worse. What could be worse than that? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He faced her again. How old were you during the Purge? 10. And you've been alone since then? Yes. Darius was quiet for a long moment, then, I need to know something. The night of the gala, before everything went wrong, did Cassian speak to you? Elara closed her eyes, reaching for those fragmented memories. Yes, I think so. He asked me to dance, said he'd noticed me in the archives. The memory sharpened. He gave me wine, a special vintage, he said, to celebrate the harvest moon. And after you drank it, everything gets fuzzy. He drugged you, both of us. Darius's voice was cold as winter steel. And then he made sure we ended up here, bonded, with witnesses who would swear the marriage was legitimate. But why go through all that trouble? If he wanted to discredit you, there are easier ways. Unless he wanted more than discrediting. Darius moved to the edge of the balcony, looking down at the fortress below. Unless he wanted something that required both of us alive, bound, and... He stopped. And what? And vulnerable to exposure. Darius turned back to her, and there was something new in his eyes. Fear. Elara, tell me something. During the purge, was anything taken from your pack besides lives? She frowned. What do you mean? Artifacts? Records? Anything of value? Memory stirred, dark and painful. There were journals. Old ones, kept by the pack alphas. They documented everything. Alliances, bloodlines, secrets. My mother said they were more valuable than gold because they held truth. Elara's throat tightened. They burned with everything else. Are you certain? I watched the archives burn. I smelled the smoke for days. But you didn't actually see the journals destroyed. No, Elara stopped. You think they survived? I think if Cassian has been planning this for years, he'd need proof, leverage, something that could bring down a kingdom. Darius's expression was grim, and I think those journals might still exist. If they do, and if Cassian has them, then he knows everything about your bloodline, about my father's crimes, about the real reason the Nightfall Pack was eliminated. Elara's blood ran cold. What real reason? Darius met her eyes. That's what we need to find out, before Cassian uses it to destroy us both. They descended the tower in silence, both lost in thought. But as they reached the main corridor, a young guard approached, snapping to attention. Your Majesty, Commander Vale requests an audience. He says it's urgent. Of course he did. Darius's expression didn't change, but Elara felt the tension roll through him. Where? The war room, sire. Tell him we'll be there shortly. The guard bowed and hurried off. Darius waited until he was out of earshot before speaking. This is it. He's making his first move. What do we do? We play the game. Darius started down the corridor. We act like a newly bonded pair who has no idea what's really happening. We smile, we thank him for his service, and we watch every word he says. He glanced at her. And you listen for lies. What? You said you felt something was wrong when Cassian talked to you. Trust that instinct. They turned a corner, heading toward the war room. In the border territories, we say that old blood knows truth from deception. If you really are the last Nightfall, that gift might have survived. Elara wanted to argue, but she remembered the way Cassian's smile hadn't reached his eyes, the way her skin had crawled when he looked at her. Maybe Darius was right. The war room doors loomed ahead, carved oak reinforced with iron. 2 guards flanked them, and both straightened as the king approached. Ready? Darius asked quietly. Elara took a breath. Ready? He pushed open the doors. The war room was exactly what its name suggested, a space designed for planning violence. Maps covered the walls, showing every border, every pass, every settlement in the 5 territories. A massive table dominated the center, scarred from years of use. And standing beside it, studying a map of the northern provinces, was Cassian Vale. He looked up as they entered, and his smile was practiced perfection. Your Majesty, my lady. He bowed, the gesture smooth and respectful. Congratulations on your union. I apologize for not offering my regards earlier. The news caught me by surprise. I imagine it caught everyone by surprise, Darius said evenly. What did you need, Cassian? I wanted to discuss security arrangements for the Queen. Cassian's gaze flicked to Elara. A new royal presence requires updated protocols, guards, escorts, secure routes through the fortress. Thoughtful of you. I also wanted to offer my assistance in smoothing the transition. Cassian's tone was careful. I understand Lady Elara comes from modest circumstances. Court life can be overwhelming. I'd be happy to arrange tutors, advisors, whatever she needs to adjust. Elara felt that crawling sensation again, stronger now. Something in his words didn't match his expression. "That won't be necessary," she said, keeping her voice pleasant. "I'm a quick study." "Of course. Still, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Cassian's smile widened. "We're family now, after all." "Speaking of family," Darius said casually, "I understand you arranged our chambers last night." For just a fraction of a second, something flickered in Cassian's eyes. "Yes, I thought you'd want privacy for such an important evening. I hope everything was to your satisfaction." Lie. The word rang in Elara's mind like a bell. She didn't know how she knew, but she was absolutely certain that was a lie. "Very thoughtful," Darius continued, "though I'm curious how you knew we'd need the chambers prepared. I don't recall mentioning my plans." "You didn't need to." Cassian's tone remained smooth. "I could see how you were looking at her during the gala. Some things don't require words." Another lie, stronger this time. Elara forced herself to smile. "You're very observant, Commander." "Part of the job." Cassian moved around the table closer to them. "But that's actually not why I called you here. I wanted to discuss something more delicate." "Oh?" "There are rumors circulating, questions about the Queen's background." Cassian's expression was carefully sympathetic. "Some of the noble families are concerned about her bloodline. They're asking questions I thought you should be prepared to answer." Darius's voice went cold. "What kind of questions?" "Where she comes from, who her family was, whether she has the standing to sit beside you." Cassian spread his hands. "I'm not saying I agree with these concerns, but in the border territories, bloodline matters. You know that." And I wanted to offer a solution." Cassian pulled a document from his coat. "I took the liberty of having the royal genealogists research Lady Elara's family tree. We found some distant connections to minor noble houses, nothing spectacular, but respectable, enough to satisfy the traditionalists." He set the paper on the table. "All you need to do is confirm this version of her history, and the questions will stop." Elara stared at the document. She didn't need to read it to know what it contained: a carefully constructed lie, a false bloodline designed to erase who she really was. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "Because I'm loyal to my king." Cassian met her eyes. "And because I want to protect this kingdom from scandal. If word got out that you came from nowhere, with no family, no history, people would talk. They'd question the bond. They'd call it unnatural." He paused. "Or worse?" "Worse how?" Darius's hand moved to his belt, casual but deliberate. "There are old superstitions about forced bonds, about dark magic used to trap powerful men." Cassian's smile was gentle, understanding. "I know it's nonsense, but the common folk believe strange things. And rumors like that can be dangerous." The threat was clear, wrapped in concern. Elara felt the pieces clicking into place. Cassian wasn't just trying to control the narrative. He was setting up the framework for their destruction. Either they accepted his false history and became puppets he could manipulate, or they rejected it and faced accusations of dark magic and forbidden bonds. A perfect trap. "Thank you for your concern," Darius said, his voice flat. "We'll consider it." "Of course, but I would recommend acting quickly." Cassian moved toward the door. "The winter councils begin in 3 weeks. Once the other territorial lords arrive, controlling the narrative becomes much more difficult." He paused at the threshold. "I only want to help, cousin. Everything I do is for the good of the kingdom." The biggest lie yet. Elara felt it like a physical blow. Then Cassian was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Darius waited a full minute before speaking. "You felt it." Every word was a lie. Elara's hand shook. "He's not trying to help. He's setting us up." "I know." Darius picked up the forged genealogy, studying it. "This is good work. Detailed, convincing. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer." "What do we do?" "We don't accept his lies, but we also don't reject them outright." Darius's mind was clearly racing. "We need time. Time to find those journals, time to understand what he's really after. And if we can't find them before the winter councils, then we'll have to fight without proof." Darius looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same fierce determination she'd seen in the archives. the warrior who'd held these territories together through sheer will. But I've fought with less, and I've won. Elara believed him. Against all logic, against everything she'd spent 5 years hating about this man and his family, she believed him. Then we fight, she said. A slow smile crossed Darius's face. Not the cold smile he showed the court, but something real. You know, when I woke up this morning with a stranger in my bed, I thought it was the worst day of my life. And now? Now I'm starting to think whoever drugged us made a mistake. He held out his hand. Elara Thorn, last of the Nightfall Pack, are you ready to burn down some liars? She took his hand, the bond hummed between them, and for the first time it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a weapon. Let's start with your cousin, she said. Ian. They spent the rest of the day planning. Not in the war room where ears might listen, or in Darius's study where servants might pass, but in the one place no one would think to look, the archives. Elara led him through familiar corridors, down stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, into the basement where the kingdom's memories lived in dust and ink. I've never been down here, Darius admitted, looking around at the endless shelves. Most people haven't. That's what makes it perfect. Elara moved to a specific section, pulling down volumes with practiced ease. These are the war records from the Purge. Everything your father ordered documented. Including the Nightfall Massacre. Yes. She set the heavy books on a reading table. I've read them many times, looking for answers. What did you find? Questions. Elara opened the first volume. The official record says the Nightfall Pack was eliminated because they were planning rebellion, that your father received intelligence about an uprising and moved to prevent it. That's what I was told. But look at this. She pointed to a specific entry. The date of the attack, 3 days after the spring equinox, 12 years ago. Does that seem strange to you? Darius frowned. Why would the timing matter? Because the spring equinox is when territorial alphas gather for the Grand Council. Every leader from every major pack attends. It's sacred law. You don't move against another pack during council season. Elara's finger traced the careful script. Unless you don't want witnesses. My father waited until everyone was looking the other way. Exactly. And there's more. She flipped pages, showing him casualty reports, burn orders, property seizures. The Nightfall territory was absorbed directly into the Crown holdings. Not distributed to other packs, not held in trust. Taken. Everything. So it wasn't about stopping a rebellion. No. Elara's voice was quiet. It was about taking something my pack had. Something valuable enough to commit genocide for. Darius studied the records, his expression darkening. And you think those journals held the proof? I think my ancestors knew what your father wanted, and I think they died protecting it. Then Cassian found the journals. Darius closed the book carefully, which means he knows what your pack was protecting, and he's using it against us. But what could be worth all this? Elara gestured at the documents. What secret could be powerful enough to... She stopped. Darius tensed. What? The genealogies. Elara's eyes widened. Cassian requested your family's genealogies 3 months ago, and now he's created a false one for me. Her mind raced. What if it's not about erasing my history? What if it's about hiding a connection between our bloodlines? The Nightfall Pack was old, ancient. We kept records going back to the founding of the territories. Elara grabbed another volume, this one documenting pack histories. What if there was something in our bloodline that connected to yours? Something that would change the succession? Darius went very still. If there was a legitimate claim older than my family's, then your crown could be challenged. Elara found the entry she was looking for. Look, the last Nightfall Alpha before the Purge was named Theron. And before him, Elias, Darius read over her shoulder, and before him, Kael. They looked at each other. Your family name is Kael, Elara whispered, and yours is Thorn, which is the Nightfall Pack symbol. Elara's heart pounded. We're related. Somehow our bloodlines crossed. Which means if you have a legitimate claim to the Nightfall Alpha line, and if the Nightfall line has a legitimate claim to the crown, then together, we're unassailable. Darius's expression shifted from shock to understanding. That's why he forced the bond. That's why he needed us married. I don't understand. How does that help him? Because if we're unassailable together, we're also vulnerable together. Darius's jaw tightened. He's not trying to separate us or destroy us individually. He's trying to control us as a unit. Once he proves our bloodlines are connected, he becomes the only one who can verify or deny the claim, making him the power behind the throne. Exactly. Elara sank into a chair, her mind reeling. So what do we do? We find the journals before he can use them. We prove the connection ourselves, on our terms. Darius began gathering the documents, and we figure out exactly what my father was really trying to hide. Where do we even start? Cassian could have hidden them anywhere. Not anywhere. Darius's eyes gleamed with sudden insight. He's arrogant. He thinks we're too compromised, too distracted by the forced bond to think clearly. So he'd keep his insurance close. Somewhere he controls absolutely. His quarters? His quarters. Darius smiled, sharp and dangerous. Which means we're going hunting. Night had fallen over Thornhaven Fortress by the time they finalized their plan. The archives felt colder in the darkness, lit only by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows across ancient texts. Elara had spent the last 2 hours teaching Darius the layout of the officer's wing, drawing maps from memory while he committed every corridor, every guard rotation, every possible escape route to mind. Cassian's quarters are here, she said, tapping the rough sketch. 3rd floor, east wing. He keeps 2 personal guards outside his door at all times. I know those men. They're loyal to him, not the crown. Darius studied the map. We'll need a distraction. What kind of distraction? The kind that gets them away from that door long enough for us to search. He glanced up at her. How do you feel about starting a small fire? A fire? Elara's eyes widened. In the fortress? A controlled one. In the servants' wing, 2 floors down. Nothing that would spread but enough smoke to trigger the alarm bells. Darius's smile was grim. Standard protocol requires all available soldiers to respond, including personal guards. That's insane. That's why it'll work. He folded the map. Can you do it? Elara thought of her pack burning, of smoke that choked the sky for days. The idea of deliberately setting a fire made her stomach turn. But then she thought of Cassian's smile, his careful lies, the trap he'd woven around them both. Yes, she said. I can do it. Good. I'll handle the search. You set the fire, trigger the alarm, then meet me at the tower, the same one we used this morning. If I find anything, we'll need somewhere secure to examine it. And if you don't find anything, then we move to plan B. Which is? I don't know yet. I'm working on it. Darius stood, rolling his shoulders like a fighter preparing for battle. We move at midnight. That's when the guard changes. Maximum confusion, minimum supervision. 2 hours from now. 2 hours. He looked at her and something in his expression softened. Are you sure you want to do this? If we're caught, we won't be caught. But if we are, Cassian will use it against us. He'll say we're conspiring, that the bond made us desperate, that we're a danger to the kingdom. Let him try. Elara met his gaze steadily. I've been hiding for 5 years. I'm done being afraid of men like him. Something flickered in Darius's eyes. Approval, maybe, or recognition. You know, most people who find out I'm responsible for their family's death don't help me commit treason. You're not responsible. Your father was. Same bloodline. Different choices. Elara gathered her notes, tucking them into her dress. Besides, if our theory is right, we're related. Distantly, but still. That makes you family. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Does it? Darius laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. You're either very brave or very crazy. Can I be both? In the border territories? His smile turned sharp. Probably mandatory. They left the archives separately, Elara first. She climbed back to the main levels through servant passages she'd memorized years ago, keeping her head down and her steps quiet. The fortress at night was a different creature. Shadows pooled in corners, torchlight flickered against stone, and every sound echoed like a warning. She made it to her old room in the servants' quarters without being seen. Someone had already cleared out her belongings, moved them to the queen's chambers she hadn't yet visited. The space felt hollow, stripped of the life she'd carefully built. 5 years. 5 years of safety, of routine, of pretending to be someone unremarkable. Gone in a single night. Elara changed out of the fine green dress into practical clothes she'd stashed under the bed. Dark wool, worn leather, boots that made no sound on stone. Then she sat on the narrow cot and waited for midnight. The minutes crawled past. She counted her heartbeats, controlled her breathing, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. If they were caught, Darius would be seen as unstable, compromised by a bond he couldn't control. She would be branded a manipulator, maybe even executed for treason, and Cassian would win. The thought steadied her. Whatever happened tonight, she wouldn't let him win. A bell tolled midnight. Elara stood, tucked a small oil lamp and a handful of kindling into her pockets, and slipped out into the corridor. The servants' wing was mostly empty at this hour, the day staff asleep, the night staff already at their posts elsewhere in the fortress. She moved through familiar passages, counting doors until she reached the linen storage room. Perfect. Fabric burned easily but slowly, giving her time to escape before real damage occurred. She pushed open the door. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with sheets, blankets, towels, years of accumulated supplies. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled out the kindling. You can do this. You have to do this. She built a small pile in the corner, far from the main stacks, but close enough to the door that smoke would escape quickly. Then she lit the lamp, said a silent apology to whatever spirits watched over fools and conspirators, and touched flame to wood. The kindling caught immediately. Fire licked up, hungry and bright, and smoke began to curl toward the ceiling. Elara backed toward the door, watching to make sure it wouldn't spread too quickly. The flames found a loose thread on a nearby blanket. No. She stepped forward to stamp it out, but the fire jumped faster than she expected. Within seconds, half the blanket was burning, and the smoke thickened, acrid and choking. Too fast. It's spreading too fast. Elara grabbed a water bucket from the hallway and doused the blanket, but more smoke poured from the kindling pile. She needed to leave, needed to trigger the alarm before someone found her here, but the fire was growing, reaching for the shelves. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Elara froze. The grip was strong, practiced, and when the voice spoke low in her ear, she recognized it immediately. Don't scream. Don't move. Cassian. Terror spiked through her. She tried to pull away, but he held her easily, his other arm locking around her waist. I knew you'd do something stupid, he murmured. Darius is predictable when he's backed into a corner, and you're exactly the kind of desperate he'd use. Elara bit down hard on his hand. Cassian cursed and released her mouth. She spun, breaking free, but he blocked the doorway. Help! She screamed. Fire! Someone help! He backhanded her across the face. The blow sent her sprawling. Her vision blurred, and when it cleared, Cassian stood over her, his expression cold. No one's coming, little Nightfall. I cleared this wing an hour ago. He crouched down, grabbing her chin. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you two plotting in the archives? That I wouldn't have people watching? You're insane, Elara spat. No, I'm thorough. He hauled her to her feet, keeping a bruising grip on her arm. And now you're going to tell me where Darius is, or I'll let this fire spread until it takes the whole fortress. Behind him, flames climbed the shelves. The smoke was thick now, burning her lungs, making her eyes water. I don't know where he is. Liar. Cassian shook her hard enough to rattle her teeth. He sent you here as a distraction, which means he's searching my quarters right now, isn't he? Elara said nothing. Fine. We'll go find him together. Cassian dragged her toward the door, but before they reached it, alarm bells started clanging throughout the fortress. Someone had seen the smoke. Cassian's expression darkened. Change of plans. He pulled a knife from his belt and pressed it against her ribs. You're going to walk with me. Quietly. We're going to find your husband, and you're going to convince him to stop whatever he's doing. Understand? And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone knows the new queen tried to burn down the fortress on her first day. His smile was vicious. How's that for a scandal? Footsteps thundered in the corridor, soldiers responding to the alarm. Cassian pulled her into a side passage just before they rounded the corner, the knife never wavering from her side. They moved through the fortress like ghosts, Cassian navigating servant passages and hidden routes that even Elara didn't know. He was too well prepared, too confident. He'd planned for this scenario, which meant he'd been planning for much longer than they'd realized. "How long have you been watching us?" Elara asked as they climbed a narrow staircase. "Since the moment you arrived 5 years ago." Cassian's voice was almost conversational. "Did you really think your false papers would fool anyone? I knew who you were the day you walked through those gates." Her blood ran cold. "Then why didn't you kill you? Turn you in?" He laughed softly. "Because you were more valuable alive. The last nightfall, hiding right under the crown's nose. I knew someday I could use you." "Use me for what?" "For exactly this." They reached the 3rd floor, moving toward the officer's wing. "For binding Darius to a bloodline that should have died with your pack. For creating a legitimate succession crisis. For proving that the Kael line has no right to rule these territories." "You're wrong. Our bloodlines being connected makes us stronger. Only if you both live long enough to claim it." Cassian stopped outside his own quarters. The guards were gone, pulled away by the fire alarm just as Darius had predicted. But accidents happen. Queens die in childbirth, kings fall in battle, and cousins step up to save the kingdom from chaos. He pushed open the door to his quarters. Darius stood in the center of the room, holding a leather-bound journal. His eyes went to Elara immediately, taking in her split lip, the knife at her ribs, Cassian's grip on her arm. "Let her go." His voice was deadly quiet. "Drop the journal first." "Not a chance." Cassian pressed the knife harder. Elara felt the tip pierce fabric, then skin. A warm trickle of blood ran down her side. "Drop it, or I open her up right here." Darius's hands tightened on the journal. For a moment, Elara thought he wouldn't do it, that he'd choose the evidence over her life. And maybe that would have been the smart choice, the strategic choice. But he set the journal down on the table. "Good." Cassian's grip relaxed slightly. "Now kick it over here." "No." Lara's voice was steady despite the pain in her side. "Don't give it to him, Darius. Whatever's in there, he can't have it." "She's bleeding." "I'll heal. The truth won't." She met his eyes. "Don't let him win." "How touching." Cassian's tone dripped contempt. "The little Nightfall thinks she's brave, but bravery doesn't stop steel." He moved the knife higher, angling for her heart. And Elara did something she hadn't done in 12 years. She stopped hiding. Power erupted from her body. Not the gentle pull of pack bonds or the warmth of healing magic, but something older, darker. Shadow mastery, the gift that had marked the Nightfall pack as different, dangerous, worth destroying. Darkness exploded outward from her skin like living smoke. It coiled around Cassian's knife arm, cold as winter death, and he screamed. The blade clattered to the floor as he jerked away, staring at his hand where frost spread across his fingers. "What the—" Elara didn't give him time to finish. She channeled more power, letting it flow through her the way her mother had taught her before everything burned. The shadows responded like old friends, wrapping around Cassian's legs, his chest, pinning him against the wall. "You wanted the last nightfall?" Her voice echoed strangely, layered with something not quite human. "Here I am." Cassian struggled against the shadows, his face twisting with rage and fear. "You can't. This power was destroyed." "You destroyed the people, not the gift." Elara stepped closer, and the shadows grew thicker. "And now you're going to tell us everything." "I'll tell you nothing." "Then I'll take it." She pressed her hand against his forehead, and the shadows poured into him. This was the real secret of shadow mastery. Not just manipulation of darkness, but the ability to draw truth from lies, to see what people tried to hide. Her mother had called it the deepest magic, the most dangerous, because once you saw someone's true self, you could never unsee it. Images flooded Elara's mind, memories that weren't hers. She saw Cassian as a young man, standing in the archives of a conquered pack, reading journals by candlelight. Saw him discover the truth about the Kael bloodline, that they weren't the original rulers of the 5 territories. That centuries ago the crown had been stolen from the Nightfall pack through betrayal and murder. Saw him bring this evidence to the previous king, Darius's father, expecting gratitude, expecting reward. Saw the king's face twist with fury instead. This never happened. These journals never existed, and if you speak of this to anyone, the memory shifted. The Nightfall territory burning. Soldiers moving through the carnage, searching for something specific. The journals. They took every record, every piece of evidence that could challenge the Kael claim, but they missed one. The memory showed Cassian years later, finding the last journal hidden in a smuggler's cache. Reading it. Learning that one Nightfall had survived, a child, a girl, who'd escaped during the chaos. Saw him searching for years, patient and methodical. Saw him finally finding her name on a list of new Fortress employees. Elara Thorn, archivist. No family, no history. And then the plan crystallized. Keep her close. Wait for the right moment. Use her bloodline to create a crisis that would force Darius off the throne. Step in as the kingdom's savior, the one who could clean up the mess of an illegitimate king bound to a forbidden bloodline. The memories released her all at once. Elara staggered back, gasping. "I saw it," she whispered. "All of it." Darius was at her side immediately, steadying her. "What did you see?" "Everything." She looked at Cassian, still pinned by shadows. "Your father didn't destroy my pack to stop a rebellion. He destroyed them to hide the truth, that his family stole the crown. That's impossible." "It's not. It's all in those journals." She pointed to the leather volume on the table. "That's why Cassian's been planning this for years. He knows if the truth comes out, your claim to the throne is challenged. And in the chaos, he can take power." Darius picked up the journal, flipping through pages. His expression grew darker with every line. "It's all here," he said quietly. "Treaties, bloodline records, proof that the Nightfall Pack held these territories for 300 years before my ancestor—" He stopped. "Before my ancestor murdered the Nightfall Alpha and claimed the crown was freely given." "It was a lie," Elara said. "All of it. My people weren't rebels, they were victims. And my family built their entire legacy on that lie." Darius closed the journal carefully. "Which means Cassian's right. If this gets out, your crown falls." Cassian's voice was strained but triumphant despite the shadows holding him. "That's why you'll never use it, because the truth destroys you both." "No." Elara turned to him. "It destroys your plan. Because Darius and I, we're the proof that the bloodlines can unite, that the old wrong can be made right." "United?" Cassian laughed, harsh and bitter. "You hate him. His family killed yours. You think a forced bond changes that?" "The bond wasn't forced." The words came out before Elara fully realized what she was saying, but as soon as she spoke them, she knew they were true. "You drugged us, yes. You manipulated circumstances, but the bond itself, that requires recognition, choice. On some level, we chose each other." Darius looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "The old blood knew," Elara continued, "even when our conscious minds didn't. The magic recognized what we were, the last Nightfall and the Kael heir, two halves of a broken crown, and it chose to bind us together. That's—" Cassian struggled against the shadows. "That's sentimental nonsense. Is it?" Darius set the journal down and moved closer to Cassian. "Or is it the one thing you didn't account for, that we might actually choose to stand together instead of tearing each other apart?" "You won't." But there was doubt in Cassian's voice now. "When the Winter Councils come, when the other territorial lords see this evidence, they'll tear the kingdom apart. Civil war, chaos, and whose fault will that be?" "Yours," Elara said simply. "For thinking power was worth more than truth." "Truth?" Cassian spat the word. "Truth is weakness. Truth is what destroys kingdoms. Your precious Nightfall Pack learned that when they trusted Darius's ancestor, when they believed honor mattered more than strength. And look where strength without honor got your family." Darius's voice was cold. "My father died alone, paranoid, trusting no one. Is that the legacy you want?" "I want the crown. Everything else is negotiable." "Then you'll die wanting it." Darius nodded to Elara. "Let him go." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Let him go." Elara pulled the shadows back. They retreated into her skin reluctantly, like loyal hounds called off prey. Cassian collapsed to his knees, gasping. "Get up," Darius ordered. You're going to walk downstairs with us. You're going to stand before the fortress guard, and you're going to confess everything." Cassian looked up, and his smile was vicious. "You think they'll believe you? The king who woke up mysteriously married and his new queen who just happens to be the last survivor of a massacred pack?" He laughed. "They'll think you've both lost your minds." "Maybe, but we have proof." Darius picked up the journal. "And we have witnesses." "What witnesses?" "Me." The voice came from the doorway. They all turned. A woman stood there, tall, silver-haired, wearing the simple robes of the fortress healers. But there was nothing simple about the authority in her bearing. "Magistra Ivan," Darius said, surprise clear in his voice. "What are you—" I heard the alarm bells, and I heard raised voices in the commander's quarters. The old woman's gaze swept the room, taking in Cassian on the floor, Elara's bleeding side, the journal in Darius's hands. "I also heard a confession. Very interesting, Commander Vale." Cassian's face went white. "You can't what?" "Testify to what I heard." Yvain's smile was sharp. "I've been head healer of this fortress for 40 years. I've served 3 kings, and I've always wondered why the previous king was so desperate to destroy the Nightfall Pack." She looked at Elara. "Now I know." "This is treason," Cassian snarled. "You're all committing— The only treason here is yours." Yvain cut him off. "You drugged the king and queen. You attempted to manipulate the succession. And you just confessed to conspiring in genocide." She turned to Darius. "I believe that's 3 capital offenses, Your Majesty." Darius nodded slowly. "Guards!" Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Soldiers appeared, not Cassian's personal guards, but fortress regulars loyal to the crown. They took in the scene with disciplined silence. "Arrest Commander Vale," Darius ordered. "Charges of treason, conspiracy, and assault on the queen." The guards moved forward. Cassian tried to fight, but without his knife and still weak from the shadow magic, he had no chance. They hauled him to his feet, binding his wrists with practiced efficiency. "You're making a mistake," Cassian said, his voice tight with rage. "Those journals will destroy you both. The Winter Councils will hear the truth." Darius's voice was final. "All of it, and then they'll decide what happens next." Cassian was dragged away, still shouting threats. His voice echoed down the corridor and slowly faded. Silence fell over the room. Yvain moved to Elara, examining the knife wound with professional detachment. "Not deep, thank the old powers, but you'll need stitches." "I'll heal," Elara said automatically. "Not that fast, you won't. Come on." The healer guided her to a chair. "Let me work." As Yvain cleaned and stitched, Darius paced the room, the journal clutched in his hands. "You're thinking too hard," Yvain said without looking up from her work. "I can hear it from here." "I'm thinking that everything I believed about my family is a lie. Most family histories are lies to some degree." The healer tied off a stitch. "The question is what you do with the truth." "I make it public, at the Winter Councils." Darius stopped pacing. "I tell the territorial lords that the Kael claim was built on murder and theft, that the rightful line never died. It survived in the Nightfall Pack. And now, through the bond, both bloodlines are united under one crown. They'll call it convenient," Yvain warned, "a story designed to legitimize a suspicious marriage. Let them. We have proof. We have testimony. And we have—" He looked at Elara. "We have the truth. The truth that your ancestors stole my family's crown." Elara's voice was quiet. "And your father finished the job by destroying everyone who could prove it." "Yes." "And you want me to stand beside you and tell the world that we're making it right by ruling together?" "I want—" Darius stopped, then started again. "I want to give you a choice. The choice Cassian never did. The choice the forced bond tried to take away." He set the journal down and knelt in front of her chair. "Elara Thorn, last daughter of the Nightfall Pack. I'm offering you half my kingdom, not because of magic or manipulation, but because it was yours to begin with. Will you take it?" Yvain had finished stitching. She stepped back, watching them both with keen eyes. Elara stared at Darius, at this man whose family had destroyed hers, who'd been forced into a bond neither of them wanted, who had every reason to hate her as much as she had reason to hate him. But somewhere in the last day and night, something had shifted. Maybe it was the bond recognizing what they couldn't, that they were stronger together than apart. Maybe it was simply exhaustion making her reckless. Or maybe it was the shadow magic showing her the truth in his soul, the genuine desire to make things right. "I'll take it," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "We tell the whole truth. Not a pretty version. Not a story designed to make your family look better. Everything. The theft, the murders, the genocide. All of it." "That will destroy my family's reputation." "Good. They don't deserve it." Darius smiled, a real smile, tired and genuine. "Fair enough. We tell the truth, all of it." He stood and held out his hand. Elara took it, and the bond between them flared bright and warm, not forced, not manipulated, just there, real. "Well," Yvain said, gathering her supplies, "that was remarkably mature of you both. I'm almost disappointed. I was expecting more shouting." "Give us time," Elara said. "I'm sure we'll find things to fight about." "I'm counting on it." Darius helped her to her feet. "But first we need to deal with Cassian, officially." "What do you mean?" "A trial, public, formal, with all the evidence laid out for the fortress to see." His expression hardened. "He wanted scandal? He's going to get it, just not the kind he planned." "When?" "Tomorrow. I want this done before word spreads, before he can coordinate with any other conspirators." Darius looked at Yvain. "Can you testify to what you heard?" "Every word." The healer's smile was grim. "It will be my pleasure." They left Cassian's quarters together, moving through corridors still smoky from Elara's fire. Soldiers had contained the blaze quickly, minimal damage, no casualties, but the alarm had woken the entire fortress, and people stared as they passed. Elara kept her head high, meeting their gazes. She was done hiding, done pretending to be someone small and unremarkable. She was Nightfall. And the Nightfall pack didn't bow. They reached the main hall where guards had taken Cassian. He sat in chains, still defiant, still convinced he'd find a way out. "Lock him in the lower cells," Darius ordered. "Triple guard. No visitors except me." "Yes, Your Majesty." As the guards dragged Cassian away, he caught Elara's eye. "You think you've won," he called out. "But the Winter Councils will eat you alive. They'll see what you are. A nobody with delusions, and a king weak enough to believe her lies." "Let them try," Elara said quietly. And then Cassian was gone, his voice fading into the depths of the fortress. Darius turned to the assembled guards and servants. "The commander has been arrested for treason. Tomorrow, there will be a trial. Anyone with testimony is ordered to attend." His voice carried authority that brooked no argument. "Until then, the fortress is under elevated security. No one enters or leaves without my direct permission. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, Your Majesty" echoed through the hall. "Good." Dismissed. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers following them. Elara caught fragments, shock, confusion, speculation, the kind of talk that would spread through the fortress like wildfire by morning. "They're going to ask questions," she said as she and Darius climbed the stairs to the royal quarters. "Let them. We'll answer tomorrow." "And tonight?" He stopped at the door to their chambers. "Tonight, we prepare." Because Cassian was right about one thing. "What's that?" "The Winter Councils will be brutal." Darius pushed open the door. "The territorial lords will see this as weakness, an opportunity, and if we're not ready, they'll tear us apart. Then we get ready." Elara followed him inside. The chambers looked different now, not foreign, but like a space she might actually inhabit. "What do we need?" "Strategy, evidence, a united front." He moved to the table where wine and food had been laid out. "And we need to figure out exactly what the bond means for succession law." "I might be able to help with that." Elara picked up the journal they'd recovered. "If this contains the original treaties, there might be precedent for joined bloodlines." "Good. You read the legal language. I'll coordinate testimony for tomorrow's trial." They worked through the night side by side. Elara pored over ancient texts while Darius wrote orders, summoned witnesses, built a case that would either secure their reign or destroy it completely. Somewhere around dawn, Elara looked up from a particularly dense treaty document and found Darius watching her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just—" He shook his head. "Yesterday morning, I woke up thinking my life was over. That I'd been trapped, manipulated, forced into something I couldn't escape. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe the bond knew what it was doing. He smiled slightly, choosing someone who wouldn't let me hide from the truth. Even if that truth destroys your legacy? Legacy built on lies isn't worth preserving. Darius stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of writing. My father did terrible things. My ancestor before him did worse. I can't change that, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. By sharing power with the bloodline they tried to erase. Exactly. Elara closed the journal. The territorial lords are going to hate this. Probably. They might try to remove you. Let them try. We could lose everything. Then we'll lose it together. Darius crossed to the window, looking out at the fortress stirring to life below. But I don't think we will. Because the thing about the border territories, people respect strength. And standing up to face the truth, admitting when you're wrong and working to make it right, that's a different kind of strength. You're more optimistic than I expected. You're more resilient than you think. He turned back to her. We're going to survive this, Elara, both of us. She wanted to believe him, and against all logic, against 5 years of survival training that taught her to trust no one, she did. The sun rose over Thornhaven Fortress, painting the stone walls gold. Somewhere below, Cassian sat in chains, waiting for a trial that would expose everything. Somewhere in the territories beyond, lords and alphas prepared for winter councils, unaware that the foundation of their world was about to shift. And in the royal chambers, 2 unlikely allies planned their next move. One more thing, Elara said as she gathered the documents. When we tell the truth tomorrow, when we show everyone what really happened, there's going to be backlash. Not just against you, but against me. I know. They'll call me an opportunist, a manipulator. They'll say I seduced you or used magic to force the bond. Probably. And you're okay with that? Darius met her eyes. Are you? Elara thought of her pack, burning, of 5 years hiding in basements and shadows, of a forced bond that had somehow become a choice, of standing in front of a fortress full of people who would judge her, doubt her, maybe even try to kill her. And she smiled. Bring it on. The trial began at noon in the great hall, packed with every soul the fortress could hold. Nobles crowded the front rows, their fine silks a stark contrast to the leather and wool of soldiers and servants pressed against the walls. Elara stood beside Darius on the raised platform, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. She'd chosen her clothes carefully. The green dress from yesterday, now cleaned of smoke and blood, marked her as queen. But she'd added something else, a silver chain bearing the Nightfall Pact sigil, a thorn wrapped in shadow. Her mother's necklace, hidden for 12 years, now worn openly. Let them see what she was. Let them judge. Cassian was brought in chains, flanked by 6 guards. He looked surprisingly composed for a man facing execution, his military uniform still immaculate despite a night in the cells. When his gaze met Elara's, he smiled. That smile made her skin crawl. People of Thornhaven, Darius began, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. We are here to witness justice. Commander Cassian Vale stands accused of 3 crimes: drugging the king and queen with intent to manipulate the royal succession, conspiracy to commit treason, and complicity in genocide. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The last charge was unexpected. These are serious accusations, Darius continued, and they will be proven with evidence and testimony. Commander Vale, do you wish to speak in your defense? I do. Cassian's voice was steady. Your Majesty, with respect, I believe you've been deceived. The woman standing beside you, he gestured to Elara, has convinced you of lies. Dangerous lies designed to tear this kingdom apart. Explain. Gladly, Cassian turned to face the crowd. 3 days ago, I discovered that the new queen is not who she claims to be. She's not Elara Thorn, humble archivist. She's the last survivor of the Nightfall Pact, a bloodline declared enemy of the crown 12 years ago. More gasps. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Elara forced herself to remain still, to show no reaction. I confronted her privately, Cassian continued, his tone reasonable, concerned. I told her she needed to leave the fortress for her own safety, that her presence here endangered the king, But instead of leaving, she used dark magic, shadow mastery, the forbidden art, to force a mating bond with His Majesty. That's a lie, Elara said quietly. Is it? Cassian's smile widened. Then explain how a nobody archivist ended up bonded to the most powerful alpha in the 5 territories overnight. Explain the shadow magic you used against me last night. Explain why you were setting fires in the fortress. The fire was evidence of your instability, your danger. Cassian turned back to Darius. Your Majesty, I know the bond makes it difficult to see clearly. Mating bonds cloud judgment, especially forced ones, but you must recognize what's happening. This woman has manipulated you, trapped you, and now she's trying to use your authority to legitimize her claim to power. The crowd murmured agreement. Elara felt the mood shifting, turning against her. She even has false evidence, Cassian pressed. Journals, she claims, prove the Nightfall Pact's innocence. But those journals are forgeries. I can prove it. How? Darius's voice was dangerously quiet. Bring me the journal. Let me show the court. Darius nodded to a guard who brought forward the leather-bound volume. Cassian took it carefully, almost reverently. This journal claims to be 300 years old, he said, flipping pages. It claims to document the original transfer of power from the Nightfall Pact to the Kale line. But look closely at the binding. See these stitches? This is modern technique, no more than 20 years old. The paper, he held a page to the light, treated with chemicals that didn't exist 3 centuries ago. This is a very good forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. Elara's heart sank. She looked at Darius, whose expression had gone carefully blank. Where did you get this journal, Your Majesty? Cassian asked gently. From your quarters, Darius said, where you'd hidden it. I had it in my quarters because I confiscated it from her, Cassian pointed at Elara. 2 days ago, I found her in the royal archives after hours, with this journal and materials for aging paper. She was creating false evidence. When I confronted her, she fled. I kept the journal as proof of her deception. He's lying, Elara said, but her voice lacked conviction. Because if the journal was a forgery, if Cassian had planted false evidence for them to find, then their entire case collapsed. Am I? Cassian's expression was sympathetic. Your Majesty, I understand you want to believe her. The bond makes that natural, but think rationally. Why would I, your most loyal commander, suddenly turn traitor? What would I gain? The crown, Darius said flatly. I don't want the crown. I've never wanted it. Cassian spread his hands. I've served your family for 20 years. Fought beside you, bled beside you. Why would I throw that away? Because you knew the truth about the Kyle bloodline. What truth? That your ancestor took power through strength and strategy? That's not a secret. That's history. The border territories have always been ruled by the strong. Cassian's voice rang with conviction. Your father eliminated the Nightfall Pact because they were planning rebellion. That's documented fact, witnessed by dozens of officers. Officers you could have bribed or threatened, Elara said. Could have, but didn't. Cassian turned to the crowd. I call my first witness. Captain Rowan Blackwood, please step forward. An older soldier pushed through the crowd, gray-haired, scarred, wearing the insignia of the Fortress Guard. Captain Blackwood, Cassian said, you served under the previous king during the Nightfall elimination. What were you told about the operation? That the Nightfall Pact was harboring rebels and planning to attack during the Spring Council, Blackwood said, his voice gruff. We had intelligence reports, intercepted messages. The threat was real. And did you see evidence of this rebellion? Yes, sir. We found weapons caches, battle plans, lists of targets. The Nightfall Alpha was definitely planning something. Elara's hands curled into fists. Those could have been planted, just like the journal. By who? Blackwood looked at her directly. Begging your pardon, my lady, but I was there. I saw the evidence with my own eyes. Your pack was dangerous. We were defending ourselves. From what? From... Elara stopped. She didn't know. She'd been 10 years old, sheltered from the politics and dangers. All she knew was fire and screaming and her mother pushing her through a hidden passage, telling her to run and never look back. Cassian seized on her hesitation. You see? She has no real knowledge of what happened. Only childhood memories colored by trauma and fear. I sympathize. Truly I do. but sympathy can't change facts. The facts are lies, Darius said, his voice hard. Captain Blackwood, you said you found weapons and plans. Where are they now? Blackwood frowned. In the royal vault, I assume. Standard procedure for captured enemy materials. Wrong. I've examined the vault. There's nothing from the Nightfall Pack except property records of seized land. Darius's eyes narrowed, which means either those weapons never existed, or someone removed them. Or they were destroyed after documentation, which is also standard procedure for dangerous materials, Cassian countered smoothly. Your Majesty, you're looking for conspiracy where there's only tragedy. Yes, a pack was eliminated. Yes, it was brutal, but it was necessary to protect the kingdom. You're protecting lies, Elara said, her voice shaking with fury. You're protecting the theft of my family's legacy. I'm protecting the truth. Cassian's facade finally cracked, anger flashing across his face. Your family lost power 300 years ago because they were weak, because they valued honor over strength, treaties over action. My ancestor, yes, the Kael ancestor, took what they were too soft to keep. That's how the border territories work. That's how they've always worked. So you admit it, Darius said quietly. You admit the crown was taken by force. Of course it was, just like every crown in history. Cassian's smile returned. But that doesn't make it illegitimate. Power establishes legitimacy. Your family has held these territories for 3 centuries through strength and will. That's real. What she's offering, he gestured dismissively at Elara, is fantasy. A fairy tale about restoring some imagined golden age that never existed. The crowd was murmuring now, some in agreement, some in confusion. Elara could feel support slipping away like sand through her fingers. I call my next witness, Cassian announced. Magistra Yvain. The healer stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Magistra, Cassian said. You treated the queen last night after she was injured. Can you describe the nature of her wounds? A shallow knife cut to her ribs? Defensive wounds on her palms? Bruising on her face and arms? Consistent with a struggle? Yes. And did you observe anything unusual about her during treatment? Yvain hesitated. She used shadow magic. I saw it with my own eyes. The crowd erupted. Shadow mastery had been forbidden since the Nightfall elimination, declared too dangerous for any pack to possess. Did this shadow magic appear forced or coerced? Cassian pressed. Did she seem to be learning it for the first time, or was she clearly experienced? She was experienced, Yvain admitted quietly. She wielded it like someone who'd trained for years. Which means she's been hiding this ability since arriving at the fortress, hiding her true nature, her true power. Cassian turned to the crowd. This woman is not a victim. She's a threat, a trained shadow master who infiltrated our fortress, seduced our king through magical manipulation, and now seeks to overthrow the established order. That's not, Elara started, but Darius caught her arm. Let him finish, he murmured. He's overplaying his hand. Cassian was on a roll now, his voice rising with each point. She set fires. She attacked a royal commander. She practices forbidden magic. And she wants us to believe she's innocent, that she's the wrong party. He laughed. The evidence speaks for itself. Then let's examine all the evidence, Darius said, stepping forward. You've made compelling arguments, cousin, but you've left out one crucial fact. What fact? The mating bond itself. Darius's voice carried absolute authority. You claim it was forced through shadow magic, but mating bonds don't work that way. They can't be forced. The magic reads intent and choice at a soul level. Every healer, every alpha in this room knows that. Cassian's smile faltered slightly. So if the bond is real, Darius continued, if it was recognized by the old magic as legitimate, then one of 2 things is true. Either Elara and I both chose this bond on some level, consciously or not, or someone used ancient magic to forge a false bond, Cassian interrupted, which is exactly what I'm accusing her of. No. You're accusing her of using shadow mastery to force me. But shadow mastery doesn't create bonds, it reveals truth. Darius turned to Yvain. Magistra, in your 40 years of service, have you ever heard of shadow magic being used to force a mating bond? Yvain shook her head slowly. No, Your Majesty. Shadow mastery works through darkness and revelation. It cannot create bonds. Then how do you explain the bond? Cassian demanded. I'll show you. Elara stepped forward before Darius could stop her. You want to know what shadow mastery really does? I'll demonstrate. She called the power without hesitation this time. Darkness poured from her skin like smoke, coiling around her in living patterns. The crowd gasped and pressed back, but she didn't stop. She let the shadows grow, spread, fill the hall with cold twilight. Shadow mastery doesn't force or create, she said, her voice echoing strangely. It reveals. It shows what people hide, their secrets, their lies, their truth. She sent the shadows toward Cassian. He tried to dodge, but the darkness moved faster. It wrapped around him, sank into his skin, and his eyes went wide with panic. What are you doing? Stop! You can't! Let them see, Elara said. Let everyone see what you really are. The shadows pulsed, and suddenly images formed in the air, memories pulled directly from Cassian's mind, projected for the entire hall to witness. They saw him discovering the truth about the Kael bloodline, just as Elara had seen. But this time, the crowd saw it too, saw him bring the evidence to the previous king and watched the king's response. Destroy it all, the journals, the pack, everything. But, Your Majesty, if we could simply suppress the information, no. No evidence can remain. Kill them all. The memory shifted. Cassian leading soldiers through the Nightfall territory, not to stop a rebellion but to eliminate witnesses, setting fires, destroying archives, and executing anyone who tried to flee. A woman pressed a child through a hidden door, screaming, "Run! Don't look back!" The child was Elara, 10 years old and terrified. The woman was her mother, who died seconds later. And Cassian was the soldier who'd killed her. The shadows released the memory. The hall sat in shocked silence. Cassian fell to his knees, breathing hard. You can't. Those are private. Those are evidence, Darius said, his voice like winter steel, of murder, of genocide, of exactly what we accused you of. I was following orders. Cassian's composure shattered completely. The king commanded it. I had no choice. You had a choice when you found the last journal, when you tracked Elara to this fortress, when you drugged us and forced the bond. Darius's hands curled into fists. You chose power over honor every single time. Because honor doesn't keep you alive in the border territories. Strength does. Power does. Cassian looked up, and his eyes were wild. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I orchestrated the bond. Yes, I kept the journals as leverage, because I knew someday the KL line would be challenged, and I wanted to be the one controlling that challenge. Why? Elara asked, her voice raw. Why go through all this? Because I should be king. The words burst out of Cassian like poison. I've done everything for this kingdom, fought its wars, secured its borders, eliminated its threats. I've been loyal for 20 years. And what do I get? Nothing. I'm the cousin, the commander, the eternally second place. His laugh was bitter. But if I could prove the Kael claim was fraudulent, if I could create a succession crisis, then in the chaos I could take what should have been mine all along. The crown, Darius said softly. The crown, the power, the respect I deserve. Cassian struggled against his chains. I'm a better ruler than you'll ever be, stronger, more decisive, less burdened by sentiment and doubt. You're a murderer and a traitor. I'm a survivor. And in the border territories, that's what matters. Darius looked at the crowd. You've all heard his confession. You've seen the evidence. The law is clear. Wait. Elara stepped forward. Before you pass sentence, there's something else everyone needs to see. She pulled the Nightfall necklace from around her neck and held it up. The silver thorn caught the light, and beneath it, almost invisible unless you knew to look, were tiny inscriptions. This was my mother's, and her mother's before her. It's been passed down through the Nightfall Alpha line for generations. She looked at Darius. May I? He nodded. Elara closed her eyes and channeled power into the necklace. The shadows responded, and suddenly the inscriptions blazed with silver light, projecting words onto the wall behind the throne. They were names, bloodline records stretching back centuries. And there, halfway up the list, 2 names joined by a marriage bond. Kyle Nightfall, and Sarah Thornwood. The crowd erupted. "That's impossible," someone shouted. "The bloodlines merged 300 years ago." "This changes everything." Elara let the light fade. "The Kyle and Nightfall lines aren't enemies. They never were. They're family. The original Kyle was a Nightfall alpha who married into the Thornwood pack. The name changed, but the blood remained the same." "Which means the crown was never stolen," Darius said, understanding flooding his expression. "It was inherited. My ancestor married into the Nightfall line, took their name and their authority, and when that line died out, it passed to the Kyle descendants. Legally, legitimately." Elara turned to the crowd. "There was no theft. There was succession. But someone wanted to hide that truth. Someone who knew that if the bloodlines were united, they'd be unassailable." "My father," Darius said quietly. "He found out about the connection, realized it legitimized his rule, but also meant he couldn't eliminate the Nightfall pack without eliminating his own claim. So he rewrote history," Elara finished, "declared them rebels, destroyed the evidence, and raised his son to believe the lie." The crowd was in chaos now. Nobles arguing with each other, soldiers demanding explanations, servants whispering furiously. But through it all, one voice cut clear. "This doesn't change what she did." Lady Maren Ashford pushed forward, her face flushed with anger. "She still used forbidden magic. She still forced the bond." "The bond wasn't forced," Darius's voice rang with certainty. "It was recognized. Our bloodlines were meant to join. The old magic knew it even when we didn't." "Convenient," Maren spat. "The king defends his shadow witch. She's not a witch. She's my queen, and she's the living proof that my family's rule is legitimate." Darius moved to stand beside Elara. "Anyone who challenges her challenges the crown itself. Then I challenge it." The hall went silent. A man stepped forward from the back of the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the colors of the Eastern Territories. Lord Valen Stormridge, one of the most powerful alphas in the 5 territories. "Lord Stormridge," Darius acknowledged carefully. "You have something to say?" "I do." Valen's voice carried easy authority. "I arrived this morning for the winter councils and heard rumors of chaos in the fortress. Now I see those rumors were understated." He looked at Elara, his expression unreadable. "You claim Nightfall blood. Prove it." "I just showed you the bloodline records. Records can be faked. The commander just said as much." Valen smiled coldly. "If you're truly Nightfall, truly Alpha-born, then prove it the old way. Challenge and combat." Darius went rigid. "That's not necessary." "It's absolutely necessary." Valen turned to the crowd. "We're being asked to accept a massive change to the succession, to acknowledge that the Kyle line merged with Nightfall centuries ago, that this woman has legitimate claim to power, but we have only her word and some glowing inscriptions." He looked back at Elara. "The border territories respect strength. Show us yours." Alara's mind raced. Challenge in combat was the oldest law in the territories, a trial by battle where alphas proved their worth through direct confrontation. It was brutal, often fatal, and absolutely binding. "Who would I fight?" she asked. "Me." Lady Maren stepped forward, shedding her fine cloak to reveal fighting leathers underneath. "I say you're a fraud and a manipulator. Prove me wrong." "Ah, this is madness," Darius said. "Elara hasn't trained as a warrior." "Then she'll lose quickly," Maren smiled, "unless the shadow magic makes her stronger than she appears." It was a trap. Elara could see it clearly. If she refused, she'd look weak, afraid, unworthy of the crown. If she fought and lost, the same. And if she fought and won using shadow magic, they'd call her a danger that needed to be eliminated. But if she refused, Cassian's plan won anyway. The bloodline connection would be questioned, dismissed, forgotten, and Darius would be left vulnerable to challenge after challenge. "I accept," Elara said. "No." Darius grabbed her arm. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She met his eyes. "You said the border territories respect strength. Let me show them." "You'll die." "Maybe. But I won't hide anymore." She touched the mating mark on her collarbone. "Trust me. The bond does." Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he released her arm. Clear the center of the hall, he commanded. Let the challenge proceed. The crowd moved back, creating a wide circle. Marin entered it first, drawing a long knife from her belt. She moved like a trained fighter, balanced and confident. Elara walked forward with far less certainty. She had no weapons, no training, nothing but shadow magic she'd barely used in 12 years. This was going to hurt. First blood or submission, Balin announced, taking position as arbiter. No killing strikes. This is proof of worth, not execution. Marin nodded agreement. Elara did the same, though her mouth was dry. Begin. Marin attacked immediately, closing the distance with practiced speed. Her knife flashed toward Elara's shoulder, a controlled strike meant to wound, not kill. Elara dodged on instinct, shadows rising unbidden to shield her. The knife passed through darkness and found nothing. Marin pulled back, circled, hiding behind magic, typical. I'm not hiding. Elara let the shadows dissipate. You want proof I'm Nightfall? Fine. But Nightfall alphas don't need magic to fight. It was a stupid, reckless thing to say, but Elara was tired of being afraid, tired of hiding, tired of letting other people define her worth. She charged. Marin wasn't expecting the frontal attack. She brought her knife up defensively, but Elara crashed into her like a storm, using momentum and fury instead of skill. They went down together, rolling across the stone floor. Elara had never been in a real fight. She'd been a child during the massacre, spent 5 years avoiding conflict in the fortress. But something woke in her now, muscle memory from a bloodline that had survived for centuries through strength and will. She caught Marin's wrist, twisted, forced the knife away. Marin responded with a vicious elbow to Elara's ribs, right where Cassian's knife had cut the night before. Pain exploded through her, and she gasped. Marin used the opening to flip their positions, pinning Elara to the ground. The knife came up, angling for her shoulder. Elara didn't think. She acted on pure instinct, reaching for the bond. Darius. She felt his response immediately, a surge of strength, of power, flowing through their connection. The mating bond flared bright and hot, and suddenly she could feel his presence like he was standing right beside her. I'm here. Use it. Take what you need. Elara drew on his strength, on the power of an alpha who'd held these brutal territories for 8 years. It poured into her like fire, and her eyes blazed silver. She caught the descending knife with her bare hand. The blade bit into her palm, but she didn't let go. She squeezed until Marin's grip faltered, until the weapon clattered to the floor. Then she reversed their positions with strength that shouldn't have been possible, pinning Marin with one hand while the other pressed against her throat. Submit! Elara growled, and her voice carried something ancient. Marin's eyes went wide. I submit. Elara held the position for 3 more heartbeats, letting everyone see. Then she released Marin and stood, blood dripping from her wounded hand. The hall was silent. Anyone else? Elara's voice rang clear. Anyone else want to question whether I'm worthy? No one spoke. Lord Valen stepped into the circle, examining her with new respect. You drew on the mating bond. I've never seen it used that way in combat. The bond is real, Elara said. That's what you wanted proof of, isn't it? That Darius and I are truly joined, truly united. It's proof of something. Valen's expression was unreadable, though I'm not certain what. It's proof that the old bloodlines recognize each other, Darius said, moving to stand beside Elara. Proof that Kyle and Nightfall were meant to join. Proof that together we're stronger than either line alone. Or proof that she's exactly what Commander Vale claimed, a manipulator using forbidden magic to trap you. Valen's voice was quiet but dangerous. My lord, I say this with respect, but the Winter Councils will not accept this woman as queen. Not without more than parlor tricks and glowing jewelry. Then what do you want? Darius demanded. Open the royal vault. Show us the original succession documents. Let independent scholars verify the bloodline connection. Valen looked at Elara. And submit to examination by neutral healers who can determine if the bond was forged or forced. It was reasonable. More than reasonable. But something about Valen's tone made Elara's instincts scream warning. Before she could respond, the great hall doors burst open. A messenger stumbled through, covered in road dust and blood. Your Majesty, he gasped. The northern border, under attack. Winter wolves, but not wolves. Slow down, Darius commanded. Report properly. The messenger straightened with visible effort. The northern territories are under siege, sire, but not by animals, by the Shadowfen pack. They're claiming the throne through old blood right. They say, he swallowed hard. They say the last nightfall has returned and broken the succession. They're marching on Thornhaven with 5,000 warriors. The hall erupted in chaos. Elara felt the floor drop out from under her. Shadowfen pack. She knew that name from the archives, a minor pack from the frozen northern wastes, barely more than bandits and raiders. How did they know about the nightfall claim? Darius demanded. This just became public an hour ago. Because I told them, Cassian said from his chains. His smile was vicious and triumphant. Did you think you were the only one I was playing? I've been in contact with Shadowfen for months, promised them proof that the Kyle crown was fraudulent, promised them the throne if they helped remove you. You started a war. Darius's voice was deadly quiet. I started a reckoning. Cassian laughed. You wanted truth? Here it is. The territories are fracturing. Every pack with a bloodline claim is going to rise up now, and your precious united front won't mean anything when 5,000 warriors are burning your fortress to the ground. Valen stepped forward. Then we have no choice. King Darius, I hereby invoke ancient law. In times of succession crisis and external threat, the territorial lords may call for a council of alphas to determine legitimate rule. You can't, I can, and I am. The winter councils are already gathering. We'll hold the vote in 3 days. Valen's expression was grim. May the strongest bloodline win. He turned and strode from the hall, and half the nobles followed him. Elara watched them go, understanding crashing over her like a wave. This was the real plan, not Cassian's fumbling attempt at manipulation, but something far more sophisticated. Valen had used Cassian's revelation to trigger exactly what he wanted, a complete challenge to the Kyle crown. We need to get to the vault, Darius said urgently. Get the real succession documents before... An explosion rocked the fortress. The walls shook. Stone dust rained from the ceiling, and through the windows, Elara saw fire blooming on the northern wall. They're already here, she whispered. The Shadowfen pack had arrived. Chaos consumed Thornhaven Fortress. Soldiers rushed toward defensive positions while nobles scrambled for safety. Another explosion ripped through the northern wall, sending chunks of stone crashing into the courtyard below. Through the smoke and confusion, Elara heard the war cries of the Shadowfen pack, wild, hungry, getting closer. Get the civilians to the inner keep, Darius ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. Captain Blackwood, fortify the main gate. I want archers on every wall, and they're not attacking the gate, Elara said, staring out the window. Look. The Shadowfen warriors weren't storming the fortress in a traditional siege. Instead, they'd blown holes in the northern wall and were pouring through like water, avoiding the main defenses entirely. Whoever led them knew Thornhaven's layout intimately. Inside job, Darius muttered. Someone gave them our defensive plans. Elara's eyes went to Cassian, still bound but smiling. You didn't just tell them about the bloodline. You gave them everything. I gave them a chance at glory, Cassian said. The Shadowfen have been starving in the frozen wastes for generations. I offered them a kingdom. All they had to do was arrive at the right moment and claim it from a weakened ruler distracted by scandal. Another explosion shook the fortress, closer this time. We can't hold them off, Captain Blackwood said grimly. Not with defenses compromised and half the fortress guard scattered. Your Majesty, we need to evacuate... No. Darius's voice was iron. We don't run. This is our fortress, our territory. We make a stand. Against 5,000 warriors? Blackwood looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Sire, we have maybe 800 soldiers in the fortress, and half of those are untested recruits. This isn't bravery, it's suicide. Then it's suicide, Darius turned to Elara. Get to the vault, find the succession documents. No matter what happens here, we need that proof. I'm not leaving you to... You have to. He gripped her shoulders. If I fall, if the fortress falls, you're the only one who can prove the bloodline claim. You're the last nightfall. That matters more than one battle. Darius, please. The word was quiet, desperate. Let me protect you, just this once. The bond between them thrummed with his fear, his determination, his absolute certainty that he was about to die defending her right to survive. And suddenly, Elara understood what her mother had felt 12 years ago, pushing her through that hidden door. Some things were worth more than one life. But she wasn't 10 years old anymore. "No," she said firmly. "We're not doing this. We're not splitting up, and we're not making last stands." She turned to the assembled soldiers and nobles still frozen in the great hall. "Everyone listen to me, right now." "My lady, this isn't the time," Blackwood started. "This is exactly the time." Elara stepped onto the platform where the trial had been held minutes ago. "The Shadowfen Pack is here because they think the Kael crown is weak, illegitimate, ready to fall. Cassian convinced them that with the right push they could take everything." "They're right," someone in the crowd muttered. "Are they?" Elara let shadows curl around her hands, visible, undeniable proof of what she was. "Because I'm standing here with the power that your previous king tried to destroy, the power he committed genocide to eliminate, and I'm offering to use it to save this fortress." "Shadow magic is forbidden," Lady Marin said, pressing a hand to her bruised throat. "Using it makes me what? Dangerous? Different?" Elara's laugh was sharp. "The Shadowfen Pack doesn't care about your laws. They're going to burn this fortress whether I use magic or not. So you have a choice. Let me help, or die clutching your principles." The hall fell silent. Lord Valen stepped forward. He'd been watching from the shadows, hadn't fled with the other nobles. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we stop fighting each other and start fighting them." Elara looked at Darius. "The bond lets us share strength. You felt it during my challenge with Marin. But it works both ways. If I channel shadow magic through our connection, you can amplify it, use it to protect the fortress." "That's never been done," Valen said slowly. "Combining shadow mastery with an alpha's power, the strain could kill you both. Better than definitely dying separately." Elara held out her hand to Darius. "What do you say? Trust me one more time?" Darius stared at her hand. Through the bond, she felt his conflict, duty warring with fear, strategy fighting instinct. He'd spent 8 years ruling through strength and control. What she was asking required surrender, vulnerability, absolute faith in someone he'd known for barely 2 days. He took her hand. "Everyone get to defensive positions," he commanded. "Archers on the walls, soldiers to the breaches. Protect the civilians and hold the line as long as you can. The Queen and I will handle the rest." "Handle it how?" Blackwood demanded. "You're about to find out." Darius turned to Cassian. "Take him to the deepest cell. Triple guard. If he escapes during this chaos, I want the guards' heads." Soldiers dragged Cassian away. He was still smiling. The crowd dispersed with surprising speed, some to fighting positions, others to safety, all of them moving with the efficient panic of people who knew death was coming. Within minutes, only Elara, Darius, Valen, and Magistra Yvain remained in the Great Hall. "This is insane," Yvain said quietly. "The amount of power you're talking about channeling, it's never been tested. The bond is strong, but it's new. Untried. You could burn yourselves out." "We'll manage," Elara said with more confidence than she felt. "And if you can't?" Valen asked. "If this gamble fails and you both die, who rules the 5 territories?" "Whoever survives the Shadowfen attack," Darius said bluntly. "Which won't be any of us if we don't act now. Lord Valen, are you staying to fight or fleeing to safety?" Valen's eyes flashed. "I've held the Eastern Territories for 15 years through 3 wars and a plague. I don't flee." He drew his sword. "But I reserve the right to judge your performance." "Fair enough." Darius looked at Elara. "Ready?" No, she wasn't ready. She'd barely used shadow magic in 12 years, had no idea how to combine it with someone else's power, and was about to bet everything on instinct and desperation. "Let's do it," she said. They moved to the fortress's central tower, the highest point, where they could see the entire battlefield. The scene below was carnage. Shadowfen warriors swarmed through the northern breaches, their war cries echoing off stone. Thornhaven soldiers fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outflanked. "How do we start?" Darius asked. "I don't know." Elara closed her eyes, reaching for the power that had slept inside her for so long. "I'm making this up as I go." "Comforting." "You wanted the truth." She found the shadow magic first, cold, dark, familiar as breathing. It rose through her body like ice water, making her skin prickle. But instead of releasing it outward like she'd done during the trial, she sent it through the bond. The connection flared, and suddenly she could feel Darius's power, hot where hers was cold, sharp where hers was fluid. For a moment they clashed, two different magics trying to occupy the same space. "Easy," Darius murmured, his hand tightening on hers. "Don't force it. Let it flow." Elara adjusted her approach, letting the shadow magic weave around his strength instead of fighting it. Slowly, carefully, the two powers began to merge. Shadow and fire, darkness and light, nightfall and Kael. The bond sang. Power exploded outward from their joined hands. Not pure shadow or pure alpha strength, but something new. Silver-black energy that crackled like lightning, flowing down from the tower into the fortress below. It hit the first group of Shadowfen warriors like a wall. They staggered back, suddenly unable to see, unable to breathe. The shadows wrapped around them, not harming but holding, pinning them in place while Thornhaven soldiers regrouped. "It's working," Darius said, wonder in his voice. "Keep going." Elara pushed more power through the bond. The shadows spread like a living thing, flowing through the fortress, finding every Shadowfen warrior who'd breached the walls. Some it held, others it disoriented, and a few it gently pushed back toward the broken sections of wall. But with every extension of power, Elara felt the strain. Her head pounded, her muscles trembled, and the cold of the shadow magic was starting to burn. "Too much," Yvain called from below. "You're pushing too hard. You need to stop." "Can't stop," Elara gasped. "If we stop now, they'll overrun us." "If you don't stop, you'll both die." Darius's grip on her hand was painful now, his own power flickering as the strain took hold. Through the bond, Elara felt his exhaustion, his pain mirroring hers. They were going to burn out. Yvain was right, but then Elara saw something that changed everything. The Shadowfen warriors who'd been held by shadow magic weren't just disoriented, they were afraid. Genuinely, deeply terrified. Because shadow mastery didn't just manipulate darkness, it revealed truth. And whatever truth these warriors were seeing in the shadows made them want to run. "Darius," she said urgently, "I need you to trust me." "I do." "Then let me show them what they're really fighting for." Before he could ask what she meant, Elara changed the nature of the magic. Instead of holding or pushing, she let the shadows show truth. She pulled on the memories she'd taken from Cassian, the real reason the Shadowfen pack was here. The promises made and broken, the manipulation. The shadows projected those memories like images on smoke. Every Shadowfen warrior in the fortress saw it. Saw Cassian promising them the throne, the territory, the riches. Saw him laughing about how easily they'd been manipulated, how they were just pawns in his plan to seize power. "He doesn't care if you die," Cassian's memory voice said. "They're Northerners, disposable. Let them bleed for me." The effect was immediate. The Shadowfen warriors stopped fighting. Some dropped their weapons. Others stared at the shadow images in shock and growing rage. "It's a trick," someone shouted. "The Shadow Witch is lying." "I'm not," Elara's voice carried across the fortress, amplified by the bond. "I'm showing you what your leader wanted hidden. You were never meant to win this battle. You were meant to die here while Cassian used the chaos to take the throne." A massive figure emerged from the northern breach, 7 feet of scarred muscle wearing the skull helm of the Shadowfen Alpha. He surveyed the frozen battlefield, the shadow images still playing, and his voice rumbled like thunder. "Who speaks for Thornhaven?" Darius stepped to the edge of the tower. "I do. King Darius Kael. Your commander promised us this fortress, promised us the crown." The Shadowfen Alpha pointed at the shadows. "Are these memories true?" "Yes. Cassian Vale betrayed you the same way he betrayed me, used you for his own gain." The Alpha was silent for a long moment. Then he removed his helm, revealing a weathered face marked by dozens of scars. "I am Ragnar Blackeats, Alpha of the Shadowfen Pack, and I was a fool." He drove his axe into the ground. "We came here for glory, for territory promised by a liar. But I won't let my people die for someone else's ambition." He looked up at Darius. "I call truce. Let us withdraw with honor, and this battle ends." The relief that washed through Elara almost made her collapse. Yes, please, no more death. Wait! Lord Valen appeared on the wall, his expression calculating. Alpha Ragnar, you came here on a legitimate grievance, questioning the succession, the bloodline claims. That hasn't changed. Lord Valen, Darius said warningly, I'm simply stating facts. Valen looked at Ragnar. The Council of Alphas is still being called. If you want to challenge the Kale Crown legitimately, you can do so in 3 days. No bloodshed, just law and testimony. Ragnar considered this. And if we withdraw now, we'll be allowed to attend this council? To present our claim? If you have one that doesn't rely on Cassian's lies, yes, we do. Ragnar's smile was grim. The Shadowfen bloodline traces to the original northern territories before the five were unified. We have as much right to speak at a succession council as anyone. Elara felt Darius tense beside her. This was what Valen wanted, not peace, but a legal framework to tear apart everything they'd been trying to build. Then we agree, Ragnar announced. Shadowfen Pack withdraws. We take our dead and wounded, and in 3 days, we meet at the Council of Alphas to settle this properly. Alpha Ragnar, Elara called down. May I ask you something? He looked up at her, curiosity in his scarred face. The Shadow Witch speaks. I'm listening. Did Cassian tell you what happened to the Nightfall Pack? The real story? He said they were rebels who were eliminated. Why? Because I'm the last survivor of that elimination. And everything you saw in those shadows, the manipulation, the lies, the betrayal, that's what was done to my people 12 years ago. Elara let the shadows show one more memory. Her mother pushing her through the hidden door, the fortress burning, children screaming. I'm not asking for your pity, but I want you to know that the man who brought you here has done this before, destroyed entire bloodlines for power. If you attend the council, make sure you know who you're making deals with. Ragnar stared at the shadow images, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. Noted, young queen. We'll see you at the council. He turned and began barking orders in a northern dialect. Slowly, with remarkable discipline considering the chaos, the Shadowfen Pack withdrew through the breaches they'd created. They carried their dead and wounded, moving in organized units that spoke to years of survival in harsh territory. Within an hour, they were gone. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Elara released the shadow magic, and the exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, but Darius caught her before she fell. I've got you, he murmured. You did it. You stopped a war. We stopped a war, she corrected, leaning into him. I couldn't have done it without the bond. The bond our lovely cousin forced on us. Best mistake he ever made. Darius laughed, tired and genuine. Come on, let's get you to the healers before you collapse. But before they could move, Lord Valen climbed up to the tower. His expression was thoughtful, measuring. That was impressive, he said. Genuinely impressive. I've never seen shadow magic used that way, revealing truth instead of hiding it. Very clever. Thank you, Elara said cautiously. Don't thank me yet. Valen crossed his arms. You've bought yourself 3 days. 3 days before the Council of Alphas convenes, and every territorial lord in the Five challenges your right to sit beside King Darius. They'll bring genealogists, historians, legal scholars. They'll tear apart every claim you make. Let them. We have the truth. Truth is malleable in politics. Valen looked at Darius. And you just demonstrated that your bond with her makes you stronger. That's going to terrify half the lords and enrage the other half. They'll say you're too powerful, too dangerous, that you violated the balance of power. What would you have us do? Darius asked. Hide what we are? Pretend the bond doesn't exist? No. Use it. Valen's smile was sharp. You want to survive the council? Don't defend yourselves. Don't apologize. Prove you're the strongest option. Show them that united, the Nightfall and Kale bloodlines can hold these territories better than anyone else. How? By doing exactly what you just did. Show truth. Expose the rot in the system. Make them see that the old ways, the lies, the manipulations, the genocide, that's what made us weak. Valen's voice grew stronger. The border territories respect strength, but they also respect justice. Give them both. Elara studied him. Why are you helping us? Because I'm not stupid. Belin gestured to the fortress below, where soldiers were already beginning repairs. What you did today, stopping a siege without slaughtering the attackers, showing mercy to people who came here to kill you, that's the kind of leadership these territories need. We've been ruled by fear and violence for too long. Maybe it's time for something different. You said you were calling the council to challenge us. I am, because you need to prove yourselves to everyone, not just me. Belin's expression was serious. If you can survive the Council of Alphas, if you can convince the territorial lords that your bond and your bloodline make you the legitimate rulers, then I'll support you, publicly, completely. And if we can't, then I'll take the crown myself and hope I do a better job than the last 3 kings combined. He nodded respectfully. 3 days. Use them wisely. He descended the tower, leaving them alone with Magistra Yvain. The healer approached with medicinal tea and disapproval. You both nearly died up here. You know that, right? We're aware, Darius said dryly. And you're planning to do something equally reckless at the council? Probably, Yvain sighed. At least you're honest about it. Drink this, both of you, and then get some rest before you collapse. The tea was bitter and warm. Elara drank it gratefully, feeling the herbs start to soothe her ravaged system. Beside her, Darius did the same, and through the bond she felt his exhaustion mirroring hers. We need to get to the vault, he said after a moment. Find those succession documents before the council. Tomorrow, Yvain said firmly. Today you rest, or I'll sedate you both. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Darius looked at Elara, and she saw her own exhaustion reflected in his eyes. Fine. Tomorrow. But first thing. They made their way down from the tower through corridors filled with soldiers clearing rubble and tending wounds. People stared as they passed, some with fear, some with awe, some with calculation. Word of what happened had already spread. The Shadow Witch and the Warrior King, stronger together than apart. It was the beginning of a legend or the beginning of a target. Probably both. They reached the royal chambers and collapsed on opposite ends of the sitting room, too tired to even make it to the bed. We survived, Elara said to the ceiling. Barely. Still counts, Darius laughed softly. Your optimism is disturbing. Your pessimism is exhausting. We make quite a pair. We really do. Elara turned her head to look at him. Darius? Thank you for trusting me up there. You saved the fortress. I think that's worth a little trust. It was more than a little. You let me channel power through our bond, through you. That's intimate, vulnerable. I know. He was quiet for a moment. But you were right. We're stronger together. I felt it when the magic merged, felt what we could be if we stopped fighting each other and started fighting for each other. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady. 3 days until the council, Elara said. 3 days to find proof, build alliances, and convince the most stubborn alphas in the territories that we deserve to rule. Sounds impossible. Probably is. Good thing we specialize in impossible. Elara closed her eyes. Wake me if someone else tries to kill us. That's a low bar for the border territories. I know. Sleep took her fast and deep, the kind of exhaustion-driven unconsciousness that couldn't be fought. She dreamed of shadows and fire, of bloodlines joining and kingdoms burning, of her mother's voice saying run and Darius's voice saying stay. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Darius was gone. Panic spiked through her before she saw the note on the table. Gone to the vault. Didn't want to wake you. Back by noon. Elara smiled despite herself. Even in a crisis, he was considerate. She washed, dressed in practical clothes, no more fine gowns, not when she needed to be ready to fight, and made her way to the fortress library. If Darius was handling the vault, she'd handle research. The council would demand proof of every claim they made. She needed to be ready. The library was empty except for the head archivist, a wizened man named Marcus who'd been her supervisor for 5 years. My lady, he said, bowing stiffly, I heard about the trial and the siege. You've been busy. That's one word for it. Elara moved to the genealogy section. Marcus, I need everything we have on the original territorial divisions, before the five were unified. That's going back 300 years. I know. Can you help? He studied her for a long moment. You were a good archivist. Quiet, thorough, never caused trouble. I had no idea you were Nightfall. That was the point. I suppose it was. He pulled a ladder toward a high shelf. The original territorial records are up here. We don't access them often. Most people don't care about ancient history. But if you're challenging the succession, you'll need them. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet. These records are a mess. Conflicting accounts, missing pages, deliberate obfuscation. Your predecessor alphas didn't want people knowing too much about how power actually transferred. Then I'll untangle the mess. Marcus handed down volume after volume, leather-bound books so old they smelled of must and time. Elara spread them across a reading table and began the painstaking work of cross-referencing bloodlines, treaties, and territorial claims. Hours passed. Her eyes burned, her head ached, but she kept going. And slowly, a pattern emerged. The 5 territories hadn't always been 5. Originally, there were dozens of small pacts, each controlling a valley or mountain range. But over centuries, through marriages and alliances and outright conquest, they'd consolidated into 5 major bloodlines: Kael, Nightfall, Stormridge, Ashford, and Shadowfen. The Kael line had risen to dominance not through strength alone, but through strategic marriages. They'd allied with Nightfall, absorbed the Ashford territories through treaty, and pushed Shadowfen into the frozen north after a brutal war. But here was the crucial part. Every major territorial transfer had been sealed with a marriage bond between ruling alphas. It was the foundation of border territory law, power transferred through blood and bonds, not just force. Which meant, "The bond matters," Elara whispered. "It's not just about Darius and me being stronger together. It's about legitimacy. Every major ruling shift in territorial history has been sealed with a bond between bloodlines." She grabbed another volume, this one documenting succession disputes. And there it was, written in careful legal language. In matters of contested succession, a mating bond between competing bloodlines shall be considered evidence of united rule, taking precedence over individual claims. Elara's hands shook as she copied the passage. This was it. This was the proof they needed. If the bond between her and Darius was legitimate, and they'd already proven it was, then legally, constitutionally, they had a stronger claim than any individual bloodline. They represented the union of Nightfall and Kael, the 2 oldest and most powerful lines. The council couldn't reject that without rejecting 300 years of their own law. Found something useful? Elara looked up. Darius stood in the doorway covered in dust, holding a metal box. "Did you find the succession documents?" she asked. "Better. I found my grandfather's private journal, the one he kept locked in the deepest part of the vault." He set the box on the table and opened it carefully. Inside was a thin book, the pages yellowed with age. "What does it say?" "That my great-grandfather knew about the Nightfall connection, knew that the Kael line carried Nightfall blood through the marriage 300 years ago. And he kept it secret because he was afraid other pacts would use it to challenge our authority. So he buried the truth. Worse, he actively suppressed it, ordered all references to the Nightfall-Kael marriage removed from official records, created the false narrative that the Nightfall pact was separate, enemy, other." Darius's expression was grim. "My father continued the suppression, and when the Nightfall pact tried to reveal the truth 12 years ago, he had them destroyed." Elara felt sick. "My people didn't die because they were rebels. They died because they knew the truth about your bloodline." "Yes." They sat in silence, the weight of history pressing down on them. "This changes everything," Elara finally said. "If we present this journal at the council, along with the legal precedent about bonds and succession, we prove that we're not some unprecedented crisis. We're the correction of a 300-year lie." Darius looked at her. "We're what should have been all along. Will the lords accept that? Some will, some won't, but they'll have to acknowledge the law." He gestured to the documents spread across the table. "What did you find?" Elara showed him the succession precedent, the original territorial divisions, the pattern of power transfers through bonds. Darius read carefully, his expression growing more thoughtful with each page. "This is solid," he said finally. "Really solid. If we present this at the council, backed by my grandfather's journal and the physical evidence of our bond, we might actually win. We might actually win, he agreed. The door burst open. Captain Blackwood rushed in, his face flushed with urgency. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Another one, Darius stood. What now? Cassian's escaped. The words fell like stones. That's impossible, Elara said. You had triple guard. Someone helped him. We found 2 guards dead and 1 missing. He's gone, along with weapons and supplies. Blackwood's jaw was tight. We've searched the fortress, but there are dozens of ways out if you know them, and Cassian knows them all. Darius's hands curled into fists. How long ago? Can't be more than 2 hours. We might be able to track him if we move fast. Do it. Take every available soldier. I want him found before he reaches the council, Elara finished. He's going to try one last time. Tell the lords that we're unstable, dangerous, that the bond was forced. Without proof, they won't believe him. He has proof, the forged journal, the one he claimed I created. Elara grabbed Darius's arm. What if we were wrong? What if he didn't plant it for us to find? What if he kept the real one and gave us the fake? Darius went pale. Then everything we just found is worthless. The lords will see the forgery, assume all our evidence is fabricated, and we lose. Elara stood. We have to find him. Now. They ran from the library, Blackwood close behind. The fortress was already mobilizing. Soldiers mounted horses, trackers examined the ground near the escaped cells, and scouts prepared to spread out across the territories. But Elara knew with cold certainty that they were too late. Cassian had too much of a head start, too much knowledge of the land. He'd reached the council site long before they could catch him. Unless, I can track him, she said suddenly. Darius stopped. How? Shadow magic. I pulled his memories yesterday during the trial. I know his mind, his patterns. She closed her eyes, reaching for that connection. If I can find his trail, the mark his presence leaves in the world, I can follow it. That's never been done at distance. Everything we're doing has never been done. Elara opened her eyes. Trust me. Always. She called the shadows, letting them spread from her body in thin tendrils, not the overwhelming darkness from the battle, but delicate threads that searched for Cassian's unique signature. The magic moved through the fortress, into the courtyard, past the walls. There, a cold trail heading east toward the mountains where the Council of Alphas would convene. He's heading for Skyreach Summit, Elara said, moving fast, probably on horseback. That's a 3-day ride. For a normal rider, but Cassian knows shortcuts through the mountain passes. He could cut that to 2 days if he pushes hard. Then we push harder. Darius turned to Blackwood. Get me 20 of your best riders. Fast horses, light gear. We leave in 10 minutes. Sire, you can't. It's too dangerous for the king to... The king is going to catch a traitor before he destroys everything we've built. Darius's voice left no room for argument. 10 minutes. Blackwood saluted and ran. Elara and Darius raced back to the royal chambers to grab supplies. They moved with the efficiency of soldiers, packing only what was essential: weapons, food, warm clothes for the mountain passes. This is insane, Elara said, strapping a knife to her belt. Welcome to the border territories. I've been here 5 years. Then you should be used to it by now. Darius checked his sword, his expression grim. If we don't catch him, everything falls apart. The council will believe his lies, reject our evidence, and declare the succession in crisis. And then what? Civil war? Probably. He looked at her. Last chance to walk away. You could stay here, where it's relatively safe. Let me handle this. Not a chance. Elara tied back her hair. We're in this together, remember? Stronger together than apart. You're going to get yourself killed. So are you. At least we'll have company. Despite everything, Darius smiled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can't I be both? They met the assembled riders in the courtyard. 20 of Thornhaven's best, all grim-faced and ready. Lord Valen was there too, mounted on a massive warhorse. I'm coming with you, he announced. Lord Valen, don't argue. If Cassian reaches the council site before we do, He'll poison the lords against you. I can counter that, but only if I'm there. Valen's expression was serious. Besides, you'll need witnesses to whatever happens in those mountains. Neutral ones. You're not neutral, Elara pointed out. No, but I'm respected. That's worth more. Darius nodded acceptance. Fine, but you keep up or we leave you behind. I've been riding these mountains since before you were born, young king. I'll keep up. They mounted and rode hard, pushing through the fortress gates as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The shadow trail led them east, through forests and over rocky ground, following paths that required skill and courage to navigate. Elara rode beside Darius, using the shadow magic to track Cassian's trail. It was exhausting work, requiring constant focus, but she didn't dare stop. Every minute they lost gave him more time to reach the council. They rode through the night, changing horses at a way station Darius knew. The fresh mounts gave them speed, and by dawn they'd cut Cassian's lead significantly. He's slowing down, Elara reported as they crested a ridge. Either his horse is tiring or he's being cautious. How far ahead? Maybe 4 hours, 5 at most. Then we have a chance. Darius urged his horse faster. Let's end this. They pushed on, ignoring exhaustion and cold. The mountains rose around them, harsh and beautiful and deadly. This was the border territories at their most brutal, a land that killed the weak and tested even the strong. But Elara had survived 12 years in this place. She'd learned its lessons, earned its respect. She wasn't afraid anymore. They found Cassian's trail at a narrow mountain pass just before noon, fresh hoofprints in the snow, heading toward the summit where the Council of Alphas would meet. He's close, Darius said, drawing his sword. The pass opened onto a wide plateau, and there, standing beside an exhausted horse, was Cassian Vale. He'd been expecting them. Cousin, he called out, his voice echoing off the rocks. Right on time. They spread out surrounding him, but Cassian didn't run. He stood calmly, one hand resting on a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. The journals? Elara said. You have the real ones. I do, Cassian smiled. Did you really think I'd leave the most valuable evidence where you could find it? I've been planning this for years. I'm thorough. Give them to us, Darius commanded. It's over, Cassian. You've lost. Have I? Cassian pulled out a journal, old, genuine, unmistakably authentic. This contains the truth about the Kale Nightfall connection, proof that your family stole the crown and buried the evidence. If I present this at the council, every lord will question your legitimacy. They'll also see you for what you are, a traitor and a murderer. Will they? Or will they see a loyal commander trying to save the kingdom from a manipulated king and his shadow witch queen? Cassian's smile widened. It's all about the story, cousin. Who tells it? Who controls the narrative? Then we'll tell ours, Elara said, about how you orchestrated everything, the drugging, the forced bond attempt, the Shadowfen attack. My word against yours? Cassian held up the journal. And I have proof. What do you have? A bond that looks suspicious, shadow magic that terrifies people, and a bloodline claim that rewrites 300 years of history. He was right. They could tell the truth, but without proof, it would sound like desperate lies. Unless... Elara dismounted slowly. You're forgetting something, Cassian. What's that? I don't need proof. I can show the truth. She let shadows curl around her hands. Just like I did at the trial. Just like I did with the Shadowfen pack. Cassian's smile faltered. You wouldn't. Not here. Not without the bond to amplify you. Want a bet? She advanced, and he backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The plateau ended in a sheer cliff, hundreds of feet of empty air. Stay back, Cassian warned, pulling the journal close. If you touch me, I'll destroy this. Throw it over the edge, then you'll have no proof at all. Go ahead, Elara kept walking. Destroy it, because the truth doesn't live in paper and ink. It lives in people, in memories, in blood. She was close enough now to see fear in his eyes, and I can pull it right out of your mind. You can't. The strain, without the king to amplify you, the magic will kill you. Maybe, Elara smiled. Let's find out. She lunged. Cassian tried to dodge, but she caught his arm. Shadow magic poured from her in a wave, and this time she didn't hold back. She dove into his memories with brutal force, searching for everything he knew about the bloodline, the journals. the truth. The pain was excruciating. Without Darius to balance the magic, it burned through her like acid, but she held on, pulling memory after memory. She saw Cassian hiding the real journals in a cave 3 miles from here, saw him creating the forgery to plant in his quarters, saw every manipulation, every lie, every murder he'd committed in pursuit of power. And she pulled it all into the shadows, weaving it into a permanent record that couldn't be destroyed or denied. Then she collapsed. Darius caught her before she hit the ground. "Elara, got it," she gasped. "Everything. The cave, 3 miles north, the journals." "Stop talking. Save your strength." But she'd done it. Even as darkness closed around her vision, she knew she'd won. Cassian was on his knees, the leather satchel forgotten beside him. Lord Valen dismounted and picked it up, examining the contents. "Well," he said slowly, "this is interesting." "What?" Darius asked, supporting Elara's weight. Valen pulled out not just journals, but documents, letters, treaties, evidence that spanned decades. He was more thorough than I expected. This isn't just proof about the Nightfall-Kyle connection. It's documentation of every manipulation, every suppression of truth, every crime committed to keep the lie alive. He looked at Cassian with something like respect. "You really were planning to bring down the entire system." "I was planning to fix it," Cassian spat. "To put someone strong on the throne instead of someone who values truth over power?" Valen's voice was cold. "The border territories need strength, yes, but strength without honor is just brutality, and we've had enough of that." He turned to Darius. "The Council of Alphas convenes tomorrow. I suggest we arrive with evidence, witnesses, and a very compelling story." Darius nodded, his attention still on Elara. "Can you ride?" "Not well," she admitted, "but I'll manage." "You just nearly killed yourself pulling memories from a man's mind. You're not managing anything." He lifted her easily, settling her in front of him on his horse. "You're resting." Elara wanted to argue but didn't have the strength. She leaned back against him, feeling the bond wrap around them both. Warm and steady and real. They'd won this round. Tomorrow, they'd have to win the war. Skyreach Summit sat at the highest point of the 5 territories, where mountain peaks pierced clouds and the wind carried voices across impossible distances. It was neutral ground, chosen centuries ago for councils precisely because no single pack could claim it. Stone pillars marked the ancient gathering place, and between them, territorial lords had assembled their camps. Elara counted at least 200 alphas, advisors, and warriors as their party rode through the outer perimeter just after dawn. Every major bloodline was represented: Stormridge, Ashford, Shadowfen, and a dozen smaller packs she recognized from the archives. Their banners snapped in the bitter wind, a riot of colors against gray stone. "They're all here," she murmured. "Of course they are." Darius's voice was grim. "A succession crisis brings out everyone who's ever wanted power. They're like carrion birds circling a dying animal." Cheerful. Realistic. She'd slept fitfully during the ride to the summit, her body recovering from the brutal magic she'd channeled. Magistry Vane, who'd accompanied them with a small medical contingent, had forced healing tea down her throat every few hours and threatened increasingly creative punishments if she tried to use shadow magic again before the council. Elara had no intention of using it. She'd shown everything she needed to show. Now came the harder part, convincing the lords through words and evidence instead of power. They dismounted at the central pavilion where Lord Valen was already in discussion with several other territorial lords. Cassian had been bound and placed under heavy guard in a tent at the camp's edge, his fate to be decided by the council. "King Darius," a woman's voice called out, "and the Shadow Witch who nearly destroyed Thornhaven. How appropriate." Lady Maren Ashford approached, flanked by her advisors. The bruise on her throat from their fight had faded, but her expression held nothing but cold calculation. "Lady Maren," Darius acknowledged, "I wasn't aware the Ashford territories had a claim to dispute." "We don't, but we have concerns about stability, about the precedent you're setting." Maren's gaze flicked to Elara. "A forced mating bond, shadow magic unleashed in the fortress, war nearly started with the Shadow Fen pack, all in the span of 3 days. That's not leadership, that's chaos." "The chaos was created by Cassian Vale," Elara said evenly. "We contained it." "By using forbidden magic," Maren smiled.
Tell me, how many laws are you willing to break for power? How many were broken to keep your family's lands? Darius countered. I've read the Ashford treaties, Lady Marin, very creative interpretations of succession law. Some might say deliberately misleading. Marin's expression hardened. Careful, Your Majesty. You're about to need every ally you can get. She swept away, her advisors following like shadows. That went well, Elara muttered. She's testing us, seeing if we'll crack under pressure. Darius looked around at the assembled camps. They're all testing us, waiting to see if we're strong enough to hold the crown or weak enough to challenge. Then we show them strength. Without shadow magic, without violence, without anything that looks like the tyranny my father practiced. Darius's jaw tightened. We have to be better. Prove the old way doesn't work anymore. Lord Valen appeared beside them, looking uncharacteristically serious. The council convenes in 2 hours. I've spoken with the major territorial lords, Stormridge, Ashford, Blackwater, and Thornridge. They're willing to hear your evidence, but they're skeptical. What did you tell them? Elara asked. The truth. That you have documentation proving the Kale Nightfall bloodline connection, witness testimony to Cassian's treason, and a legitimate mating bond recognized by old magic. Valen paused. They want to see everything. No summaries, no hearsay, direct evidence. We have it, Darius said. The journals from the cave, my grandfather's private records, the legal precedent Elara found. Good. You'll need it. Valen lowered his voice. But there's something else you should know. Alpha Ragnar of the Shadowfen pack arrived an hour ago. He's brought his own evidence. Elara's stomach dropped. What kind of evidence? I don't know. He's keeping it quiet until the council. Valen's expression was troubled, but he seems confident, very confident. They found Ragnar Blackius near the eastern edge of the summit, his massive frame silhouetted against the morning sky. He was examining a map with several of his warriors, planning something. Alpha Ragnar, Darius called out. May we speak? Ragnar looked up, and his scarred face showed no hostility. King Darius, Shadow Queen, I wondered when you'd come find me. We heard you brought evidence to the council. I did. Ragnar dismissed his warriors with a gesture. Come, let me show you what your commander promised my people. He led them to a tent where documents were spread across a makeshift table. Letters, maps, supply manifests, all bearing Cassian's seal. He contacted me 6 months ago, Ragnar said, pointing to the earliest letter. Said he had proof the Kyle crown was illegitimate. That if I helped create a crisis, I could claim the northern territories as independent, free from Thornhaven's rule. And you believed him? Elara asked. I believed he was lying, but I wanted to know why. Ragnar smiled grimly. So I played along, accepted his offers, made promises, and documented everything. Every message, every meeting, every piece of the conspiracy. Why? Darius asked quietly. Because in the frozen north, we survive by knowing who our enemies are. And Cassian smelled like an enemy from the first letter. Ragnar gathered the documents carefully. I was going to expose him at the council anyway, but then you did it first, at the siege. Showed my warriors the truth before they could die for a lie. So these documents prove Cassian was planning treason for months, that he manipulated multiple pacts, created false crises, and intended to seize power through chaos. Ragnar looked at them both. I'm presenting them to support your claim, not challenge it. The relief that washed through Elara was almost dizzying. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm doing this because it serves my people. Ragnar's expression was serious. The Shadowfen Pact needs stability in the 5 territories. We need trade routes, supply lines, protection from the winter creatures in the deep north. We can't get that if the crown keeps changing hands every few years. What do you want in return? Darius asked. Recognition. A seat at the table when decisions are made about the territories, and Ragnar hesitated. A formal apology for the northern campaigns 40 years ago, when your grandfather pushed my people into the wastes. Done, Darius said immediately. All of it. You have my word. Words are wind in the north, but if you hold the crown after today, I'll expect action. Ragnar held out his massive hand. Until then, we're allies. Darius clasped it. Allies. They left the Shadowfen camp with new hope kindling. If Ragnar's testimony supported theirs, if they could present a united front,
Don't get comfortable, a voice said from the shadows. Elara spun. A figure emerged from between two tents, older, weathered, wearing the simple clothes of a traveling scholar, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who saw through lies. "Who are you?" Darius demanded. "Master Aldrich, royal genealogist for the past 30 years. The old man smiled. "I'm here on behalf of several lords who want the bloodline claims verified independently. We have documentation. I've seen it. Preliminary examination suggests it's authentic." Aldrich pulled out a small leather journal. "But there's a problem. The Nightfall Kale marriage you're claiming happened 300 years ago. I can find reference to a marriage, yes, but not the names you're using." Elara's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "The marriage records show Kyle Nightfall marrying Sarah Thornwood, as you claim. But Sarah's bloodline doesn't connect to the current Thornwood line. There's a gap, 2 generations where the records simply vanish." Aldrich's expression was apologetic. "Which means we can't definitively prove the connection, not without more evidence." "The journals," Elara started, "are compelling, but they're also conveniently found right when you need them most. Some lords will question their authenticity." Aldrich looked at them both. "I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying the evidence isn't as ironclad as you think." He walked away, leaving them standing in the cold wind. "This is bad," Elara said quietly. "It's a challenge we can overcome." But Darius's voice lacked conviction. "We still have the mating bond. That's recognized by old magic, impossible to fake. Unless we use shadow magic to force it, which is exactly what half the council thinks." Elara pressed her hands to her temples. "We need something incontrovertible. Something that can't be questioned or dismissed." "Like what?" She looked at him, an idea forming, a terrible, risky, absolutely insane idea. "Like letting them see the bond themselves. Not through testimony or evidence, but directly." Darius went very still. "Elara, the council respects power and proof. What if we give them both? Open the bond during the trial. Let the lords who have mating bonds of their own feel the connection. They'll know it's real." He stopped. "That's incredibly dangerous. Opening a bond that wide, letting strangers examine it, you could be exposing us to psychic attack, manipulation, or worse." "I know, but it's also the one thing they can't fake or deny." Elara grabbed his hands. "Darius, we need certainty. Absolute proof. And the bond is the only thing we have that's absolutely true." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're asking me to trust you with our deepest connection, the most intimate part of what we are." "Yes. Even though we barely know each other, even though this bond was forced on us by someone else's manipulation." "The bond wasn't forced," Elara said firmly. "The circumstances were. But the bond itself, that chose us. And it's the strongest weapon we have." Darius closed his eyes. Through their connection, she felt his conflict, fear warring with determination, caution, fighting hope. Then, slowly, his hands tightened on hers. "All right," he said quietly. "We do this together. If it goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, we face it together. Always." The council convened at noon in a natural amphitheater carved from stone. Territorial lords sat on curved benches arranged in ascending circles, with the most powerful packs in the front. A central platform stood empty, waiting for whoever would present their case. Elara and Darius stood at the base, looking up at hundreds of faces, some curious, some hostile, all calculating. The weight of judgment pressed down like physical force. Lord Valen stood and called the council to order. "We gather to address the succession crisis in the 5 territories. King Darius Kale's legitimacy has been challenged on multiple grounds: questionable bloodline claims, a suspicious mating bond, and actions that some believe destabilize our lands." "Some?" Lady Marin called out. "Try most of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the amphitheater. Valen ignored the interruption. "King Darius and Queen Elara will present their evidence. Then we will hear testimony from other parties. After deliberation, the council will vote on whether the current rule stands or if new succession must be determined." "A fair process," Darius said, his voice carrying, "which is more than my family gave the Nightfall Pact 12 years ago." Silence fell. "That's right," Darius continued. Before we begin, I need to acknowledge something. My father committed genocide against innocent people. He destroyed an entire bloodline to hide the truth about our family's history. And his voice roughened. I grew up believing that massacre was justified, that the Nightfall Pack were rebels who deserved their fate. Elara felt the assembled lords lean forward, attention caught. I was wrong, Darius said simply. My father was wrong. And today, I'm going to prove it. He gestured to Elara. Together, they laid out the evidence on the central platform. Cassian's journals, the grandfather's private records, the legal precedent about bonds and succession, Ragnar's documentation of the conspiracy. This is the truth, Darius said, holding up his grandfather's journal. The Kyle line carries Nightfall blood. We are not separate bloodlines in conflict. We are one bloodline that was deliberately divided to serve political ends. Convenient timing, Lord Heron Blackwater called out. These journals appear exactly when you need them most. Because they were hidden by those who feared the truth, Elara responded. Hidden by men who valued power over justice. Or fabricated by a desperate queen trying to legitimize her claim. Marin's voice was sharp. We have only your word that these are authentic. You have more than our word, Elara stepped forward. You have Master Aldrich's preliminary examination. You have testimony from Alpha Ragnar about Cassian's conspiracy. And you have the evidence I pulled directly from Cassian's mind using shadow magic. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater. You admit to using forbidden magic? Heron demanded. I admit to using the gift my bloodline carried for generations, the gift that your previous king tried to destroy. Elara's voice rang clear. Shadow mastery isn't evil, it's a tool, and I used it to reveal truth, not hide it. Show us, someone called from the upper benches. If you have proof in shadows, show us what you saw. Elara looked at Darius, who nodded. She called the shadow magic carefully, letting it spread from her in controlled waves. The amphitheater dimmed as darkness pooled at the center, and within that darkness, images formed, Cassian's memories projected for everyone to see. They watched him discover the truth about the bloodlines, watched him manipulate the Shadowfen pack, drug the wine at the Harvest Moon Gala, arrange the forced circumstances that were meant to trap Darius and Elara. And they watched the massacre of the Nightfall Pack, children running, mothers screaming, archives burning while soldiers searched for journals that proved the truth. When the shadows faded, the amphitheater sat in stunned silence. This, Marin's voice shook. This is manipulation. Shadow magic showing us what she wants us to see. Is it? Ragnar stood from his bench. Because I recognize those memories. I saw them myself when the Shadow Queen showed my warriors the truth during the siege. He looked around at the assembled lords. Everything you just witnessed matches the documentation I brought. Cassian Vale contacted me with the same lies, the same promises. This isn't fabrication, this is confession. He's right, Valen added. I was present when Cassian was captured. I heard him admit to the conspiracy in his own words. Words spoken under duress, Marin argued. After being attacked by shadow magic, after being caught red-handed trying to reach this council with forged evidence, Darius interrupted. Evidence we recovered from him directly. You recovered what you claim is forged evidence, Heron corrected. But how do we know which journals are real and which are fake? You could have created both sets, one to incriminate Cassian, one to support your bloodline claim. It was a fair point, and Elara saw several lords nodding agreement. Then, let us prove it beyond any doubt, she said. Master Aldrich, would you examine the journals publicly? Compare them using whatever tests you deem necessary? The old genealogist stood slowly. That would take hours, days even, to do properly. We have time. The council doesn't. Aldrich looked around. But I can perform a basic authentication now. If the lords agree, a vote was called. It passed with overwhelming majority. For the next 3 hours, they watched Aldrich examine paper, binding, ink composition. He used tools Elara didn't recognize, comparing the journals to reference materials he'd brought. The assembled lords grew restless, but no one left. Finally, Aldrich stood. My findings are preliminary but significant. The journals presented by King Darius and Queen Elara show authentic aging consistent with their claimed dates. The ink matches period composition, the binding uses techniques that haven't been practiced for 200 years, and the handwriting, he held up several pages, Matches samples I have from the period. And the journals Cassian claimed were forgeries? Valen asked. Are indeed forgeries, very good ones, created within the last year using modern materials and aging techniques. But forgeries nonetheless. Aldrich looked at Darius. Your evidence appears genuine, Your Majesty. Relief flooded through Elara, but she kept her expression neutral. So the bloodline claim is proven? Someone asked. The historical connection is proven, Aldrich corrected, but there's still the matter of the current bond, whether it was legitimately formed or magically forced. Which brings us back to the central question, Merrin said, standing. Can we trust a queen who uses shadow magic? Can we trust a bond formed under suspicious circumstances? Even if the bloodline claim is valid, the method of uniting those bloodlines remains questionable. Then question it directly. Elara stepped forward. I'm offering to open the mating bond for examination. Let every lord here who carries a bond of their own feel what connects us. Judge for yourselves if it's real or forced. Shocked silence. Heron stopped. That's unprecedented. Opening a mating bond to strangers could damage it permanently. I know the risks. Elara looked at Darius. But we're willing to take them. For truth. I'm not, Merrin said flatly. This is a trap. She'll use shadow magic to make the bond appear legitimate. Then you check, Elara interrupted. You have a mating bond, Lady Merrin. I saw the mark on your wrist during our fight. You know what a real bond feels like. Come examine ours. Merrin went pale. You can't ask me to... Why not? Afraid you'll find out we're telling the truth? The challenge hung in the air. Slowly, reluctantly, Merrin descended from her bench. Several other lords followed, all those who carried mating bonds of their own, who could recognize the magic signature. They formed a circle around Elara and Darius. This is how it works, Elara explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Darius and I will open our bond completely. Those of you with bonds will be able to feel the connection, sense its nature, its origin, its truth. If it's forced or fabricated, you'll know immediately. And if it damages the bond, Heron asked, then we accept that risk. Darius took Elara's hand. Ready? She nodded. Together, they reached for the bond and pulled it wide open. The connection flared like lightning, visible to everyone as silver-black energy that crackled between them. But more than that, it became tangible, a presence that filled the amphitheater, that pressed against every lord with a bond of their own. Elara felt them touch the connection tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. She felt their surprise, their shock, their dawning recognition, because the bond wasn't forced. It carried no shadow of coercion, no hint of manipulation. It was pure and strong and absolutely real, forged in recognition, sealed by choice, strengthened through trust built in impossible circumstances. One by one, the examining lord stepped back. Merrin was last. She stood with her hand pressed against her chest, breathing hard. Well? Valen prompted. What did you find? It's real, Merrin whispered. Completely, absolutely real. She looked at Elara with something like wonder. How is that possible? You barely know each other. We know enough, Darius said quietly. We know we're stronger together, that our bloodlines were meant to unite, that the bond recognized something we couldn't see yet. It's the strongest mating bond I've ever felt, another lord admitted. Stronger than mine, and I've been bonded for 20 years. Because it carries the weight of 2 ancient bloodlines, Aldrich said, his voice filled with academic excitement. The Nightfall and Chaol lines were always meant to join. The magic knew it even before they did. Which makes their claim legitimate, Valen said firmly. By law, by blood, and by bond, they have every right to rule. I agree, Ragnar said, standing. The Shadowfen Pact recognizes King Darius and Queen Elara as rightful rulers of the 5 territories. As does Stormridge, Valen added. Slowly, other lords began to stand, some readily, some reluctantly, but standing nonetheless. Recognition rippled through the amphitheater like a wave. Only a handful remained seated. Merrin was one of them. This doesn't change the fact that shadow magic is forbidden, she said, that using it sets a dangerous precedent. Then let's change the law. Elara's voice was clear and strong. Shadow mastery was forbidden because it revealed truths powerful people wanted hidden. But I'm proposing we embrace truth instead of hiding from it. Make shadow magic legal again, regulated and trained, used to expose corruption instead of enabling it. That's... Marin stopped. That's a complete overhaul of territorial law. Good. The old laws were built on lies. Time for new ones built on truth. I support this proposal, Ragnar said. The North has suffered too long from Southern laws that don't reflect our reality. If we're rebuilding the system, let's rebuild it properly. As do I, Valen agreed. But such changes require consensus, a majority vote from the territorial lords. Then let's vote, Darius said. Right now. All those in favor of legalizing shadow mastery under regulated conditions? The vote was closer than Elara expected, barely passing with a slim majority. But it passed. All those in favor of recognizing the current succession as legitimate? Valen called. This vote was stronger. 2/3 of the lords stood in support. Then it's settled, Valen announced. King Darius Kyle and Queen Elara. Nightfall Kale are recognized as legitimate rulers of the 5 territories. The succession is secured. The amphitheater erupted in applause, not universal, but significant. Elara sagged against Darius, the tension finally releasing. They'd done it. Against all odds, all opposition, they'd proven their claim and kept the crown. But the council wasn't finished. There remains the matter of Commander Cassian Vale, Heron said, standing. His crimes have been proven beyond doubt. What is to be his fate? Darius's expression hardened. By rights, he should be executed. Treason, conspiracy, genocide, any one of those crimes carries a death sentence. But, Valen prompted, but execution makes him a martyr, gives those who still question our rule something to rally around. Darius looked at Elara. What do you think? He murdered your family? The choice should be yours. Every eye in the amphitheater turned to her. Elara thought of her mother, her pack, 12 years of hiding and fear. She thought of Cassian's smile, his manipulations, his absolute conviction that power mattered more than people. Part of her wanted him dead, wanted the justice of watching him pay for what he'd taken from her. But a larger part remembered the Shadowfen warriors laying down their weapons when shown the truth. Remembered that mercy could be stronger than vengeance. Exile, she said finally. Strip him of rank, title, and territory. Send him to the frozen wastes beyond the northern border with nothing but the clothes on his back. Let him survive on his own strength, without manipulation or conspiracy. If he lives, he lives. If he dies, she shrugged, then the North delivers its own justice. Silence. Then Ragnar laughed, deep and booming. I like this queen, he declared. She thinks like a northerner, harsh, but fair. I agree with the sentence, Valen said. Let it be carried out immediately. The vote was unanimous. Cassian was brought before the council in chains. When he saw the assembled lords standing in recognition of Darius and Elara's rule, something in his expression crumbled. You won, he said quietly. I underestimated you both. You underestimated truth, Elara corrected. Thought it was weakness instead of strength. Maybe it is both. Cassian looked at Darius. For what it's worth, cousin, you'll make a better king than I would have. You actually care about these people. I do, which is why I'm not killing you. Darius's voice was hard. But if you ever return to the 5 territories, that mercy ends. Understood? Understood. They watched as guards led Cassian away toward the northern wastes and whatever fate awaited him there. Elara felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a quiet certainty that justice had been served. The council adjourned as the sun began to set, painting the summit in shades of red and gold. Lords dispersed to their camps, already planning for the winter councils where the real work of governing would begin. Elara and Darius stood alone on the central platform, watching the territories spread out below them in endless mountains and forests. We did it, she said quietly. We did. Darius's hand found hers. Against every odd, every challenge, every person who said it was impossible. What happens now? Now? He smiled. Now we actually have to rule. Make good on all those promises about truth and justice and building something better. Sounds exhausting. Probably will be. He pulled her closer.
But we're doing it together. That makes it manageable. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady and absolutely real. What had started as a trap, a manipulation, had become something neither of them expected. A partnership forged in fire and proven through impossible trials. "I have one more question," Elara said after a moment. "What's that?" "Now that we've secured the succession, now that we don't need the bond for political legitimacy," she looked up at him. "Do you want to keep it?" Darius went very still. "What?" "The bond. It was forced on us by Cassian's manipulation. We've proven it's real, but that doesn't mean we have to keep it. There are ways to dissolve mating bonds if both parties agree." "I know." His voice was quiet. "Is that what you want?" "I'm asking what you want." He stared out at the territories for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 3 days ago, I would have said yes, would have done anything to break a bond I didn't choose, with a woman I didn't know, that threatened everything I thought I understood about my family and my rule. And now? Now I know that bond is the best thing that ever happened to me. He turned to face her fully. "You challenged me, pushed me to see truths I'd been avoiding, made me question everything I thought I knew. And you did it while being brave and stubborn and absolutely terrifying with shadow magic." Despite everything, Elara laughed. "I don't want to break the bond," Darius said firmly. "I want to keep it, strengthen it, build on it. Not because we have to for politics, but because I choose you, actually choose you, without manipulation or magic or anything except—" He stopped. "Except the fact that I can't imagine doing this without you anymore." Elara felt tears prick her eyes. "I choose you too, even though your family destroyed mine. Even though we're probably going to fight about everything from law reform to dinner menus. Even though this is going to be complicated and messy and difficult. Especially because of all that." Darius cupped her face gently. "We're stronger together. The bond knew it before we did." She kissed him, and through their connection she felt his absolute certainty, his commitment, his choice, not forced by magic or circumstances, but freely given. When they pulled apart, the sun had fully set, and stars were beginning to emerge overhead, thousands of them, brilliant against the dark sky. "We should head back," Darius said reluctantly. "There's work to do. Treaties to renegotiate, laws to change, apologies to make. Tomorrow," Elara interrupted. "Tonight, we just be. Two people who survived something impossible and came out stronger. I can do that." He pulled her close, and they stood together on the summit, looking out at the territories they would rule. Below them, campfires bloomed like stars. The territorial lords were settling in for the night, already planning and scheming for the work ahead. But for the first time in the 5 territories' history, those plans would be built on truth instead of lies, on partnership instead of domination. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, setbacks, challenges neither of them could predict. But they would face it together. The warrior king and the shadow queen, 2 halves of a broken crown finally made whole. "Thank you," Elara said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For choosing truth even when it meant destroying your family's legacy." "That legacy was poison." Darius's voice was firm. "What we're building now, that's worth preserving." They descended from the summit as the moon rose, walking through camps where lords nodded respectfully instead of challenging, returning to their own tent where Magistra Yvain waited with more healing tea and sharp commentary about their recklessness. But beneath the old healer's grumbling, Elara heard approval. Pride, even. That night, she didn't dream of fire and screaming. She dreamed of her mother's face, proud, hopeful, at peace. Dreamed of the Nightfall Pack running free again, no longer hunted or hiding, but acknowledged and honored. When she woke before dawn, Darius was already awake, reviewing documents by candlelight. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much to think about." He set down the papers. "I've been drafting a proposal for the Winter Councils. A memorial for the Nightfall Pack. Official recognition of what was done to them. Reparations for the families of survivors, if any can be found. And a sanctuary in their name." Elara's throat tightened. "A sanctuary? For those with rare gifts, shadow masters, truth seekers, anyone whose abilities make them targets." Darius looked at her. "We can't bring back what was lost, but we can make sure it never happens again.
They would have liked that, she whispered. My mother especially. She always said our gifts were meant to protect, not destroy. Then we'll make it happen, together. The word had become their touchstone. Together, not forced or manipulated, but chosen and strengthened through fire. 6 months later, the Nightfall Memorial Sanctuary opened in the heart of what had been the Nightfall territories. It stood as both remembrance and promise, a place where those who were different could be safe, where gifts like shadow mastery could be taught and honored instead of feared and destroyed. Elara planted the first tree herself, a silver birch that caught moonlight and shadow in equal measure. Darius stood beside her, and behind them, territorial lords who had once questioned their right to rule now stood as witnesses and supporters. The border territories were changing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. Old laws fell away, replaced by new ones built on transparency and justice. Shadow masters trained openly, their gifts used to expose corruption and reveal truth. And at the center of it all, a king and queen who ruled not through fear but through partnership. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still lords who resented the changes, still pockets of resistance that had to be carefully managed. But the foundation was strong, built on truth that couldn't be shaken. Standing in the sanctuary on its opening day, Elara felt the bond thrum with contentment. Through it, she felt Darius's satisfaction, his hope for what they were building. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. So would your grandfather. The one who kept the journal, who documented the truth even though he couldn't reveal it. Strange, isn't it? How the truth finds a way, even when people try to bury it. Not strange. Inevitable. Elara took his hand. Truth is patient. It waits for the right moment, the right people. People like us? People exactly like us. She looked up at him, at this man who'd become so much more than a forced bond or political necessity. Two halves of a broken crown, put back together stronger than before. He kissed her forehead, gentle and certain. Here's to broken things made whole. They stood together as the sun set over the sanctuary, over the territories that stretched endlessly in all directions. Two survivors who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and chosen to build something better. The border territories had been ruled by violence and fear for 300 years, but now, finally, they were ruled by truth. And truth, as Elara had learned, was the strongest power of all. The last light faded, and stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed the Nightfall Pact's destruction, the same stars that now watched their memory honored and their legacy preserved. The past couldn't be changed, but the future could be shaped, and Elara and Darius together would shape it well.